providing comprehensive real estate services. My House Partners, committed locally, thinking global.
This is
Through the chair, you're live on HCAM TV.
All right, thank you, Bob. And hey, John, can you just go to the, actually, you know what? We'll populate here. I'm just seeing who we have here. Make sure we have a quorum. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, we at least have a quorum, so we'll get to roll call in a moment, but good evening, everyone. It is March 1st, 2021, 7 p.m. This is Gary Trendle, and I hereby call our planning board meeting to order. This open meeting of the Hopkinton Planning Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID virus, we are complying with the executive order that suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. All members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The executive order, which you can find posted with agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely as long as the public body makes provisions through adequate alternative means to ensure interested members of the public are provided reasonable access to the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. It will further include several public hearings. For this meeting, the planning board is convened by video conference via Zoom app as posted on the town's web meeting calendar and the board's agenda identifying how the public may join. And apologize, this happened last time as well. I lost the second part of my script. Hang on one second. Sorry, folks. All right, additionally, the meetings may be broadcast by HCAM through one or many of its channels or platforms. Please note this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that others may be able to see you, and take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided to the members of this body are available on the town's website via the web meeting calendar unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. Shortly, we will turn to the first agenda item. A couple of ground rules. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude the remarks, the chair will invite board members to provide any comments, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. If members wish to engage in dialogue with their members, please do so through the chair. For items with public comment, after members of the public have spoken, after members have spoken, the chair will afford public comment. All participants must begin by stating their name and address, and participants must limit their comments to 3 minutes or less. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call. So let's go ahead and just check on our attendance. Members, after I state your name, if you can just respond that you can hear me. We'll start with Rob Benson. Rob here? Not yet. How about Muriel Kramer?
Muriel Kramer here.
Hi, Muriel. Jane Moran?
Jane Moran present.
Hi, Jane. Dave Paul?
Dave Paul here.
Mary Larson Marlowe?
Mary Larson Marlowe here.
Hi, Mary. Deb Feinberg?
Deb Feinberg here.
Hi, Deb. Sundar Sivarman?
Sundar Sivarman here.
And Fran DeYoung?
Fran DeYoung present.
All right. And for staff, please respond in the affirmative when I state your name. Mr. Gelsich?
John Gelsich here.
Miss Pemberton?
Stephanie Pemberton here.
And Mr. Paradise?
Bill Paradis Sumbeda here.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your time through the formalities. Just want to quickly talk to the agenda. We have an incredibly full slate tonight, and I recognize that we have a lot of folks from the public as well. John has the agenda pulled up here, and I am going to adhere reasonably strictly to the timing that's listed here, because we know that we've got some timelines that we need to abide by, and I know that we have a lot to talk about, in particular with regards to solar and tree clearing bylaws. So we're going to go through in the order listed here, yeah, we will go from there. But before we begin, I will entertain a motion to open the public hearings for 229 Hayden Road, which would be Cornell's Irish Pub, for the proposed amendment to solar special permit for Wilson Street, for the new proposed zoning bylaw amendments, and for the proposed general bylaw amendment, and for a new public hearing for 53 East Main Street.
This is Muriel, so moved.
Deborah
Sundar
Feinberg,
Subramanian,
second.
seconded.
All right, we have a motion and a second. I'm going to assume no further discussion. We will take a vote. Mr. Benson, are you here yet? All right, so we'll start with Muriel,
Muriel Kramer, yes.
Jane,
Jane Moran, yes.
Dave,
Dave Paul, yes.
Mary,
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Deb,
Deborah Feinberg, yes.
Sundar,
Sundar Subramanian, yes.
Fran,
Randy Young, yes.
and Gary Trendle is a yes. All right, so let's dig into the administrative items first. And the first one that we have is the Form K lot release for Legacy Farms, Lot A 1 through 11, and restricted land covenants. So I see Mr. McDowell is here.
Yes.
Mr. McDowell, do you just want to literally in 60 seconds tell us what you're requesting here?
I'll try and do it in 45. So what I'm requesting is, which we've done many, many times in the past, is the planning board's endorsement of a Form K and a couple of restricted land covenants, which we do with each parcel of land that designates certain parcels as restricted land within the development.
Okay. Thank you. That was quick. Mr. Gelsich, do you have any planner comments on this request?
No comments on this.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments from the board? Okay. And then on that note, any other questions from the public or other folks? I'm going to assume no. So on that note, I will entertain a motion to release lots as described, lots A 1 through 11, as noted in the planning board packet.
This is Muriel, so moved.
Paul,
Deborah.
second.
All right, we have a motion from Muriel and a second from Dave Paul. Assuming no further discussion, we will.
Discussion through the
Yes,
chair.
John.
It's actually lot A111, not A1 through 11.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So that would be a friendly amendment to revise to release lot A111.
I accept that amendment.
Dave, you okay with that as well?
I am, thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion? All right, we'll take a vote, and we will start with Muriel.
Muriel Kramer, yes.
Jane,
Jane Moran, yes.
Dave,
Dave Paul, yes.
Mary,
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Deb,
Deborah Feinberg, yes.
Sundar,
Sundar Subramanian, yes.
Fran,
Randy Young, yes.
and Gary Trendle is a yes. Thank you, Mr. McDowell.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Quick one. All right, next administrative item is the minor amendment request from Hopkinton LNG Stormwater Manage for the Hopkinton LNG Stormwater Management Permit. And I think, is it Mr. Blackburn who's representing Eversource here?
Yes, that's correct. And we also have, I believe, Tracy Adamski, who's our consultant for stormwater.
I'm here
Okay.
as well.
All right, thank you both for attending. So again, I'm just going to ask in 60 seconds or less, can you tell us why you are proposing this amendment?
Tracy, do you want to field this or do you want me to?
Sure, I'll take it. So we're proposing to switch out a catch basin with essentially a covered trench. This is a result of the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration visiting the site and identifying the catch basin as not in compliance with their requirements. So it's considered a covered impoundment according to their regulations. And they are requiring us to remove the catch basin and instead put in a trench rating as shown on this image.
Okay, so again, this is Mr. Gelsich, do you have any comments on this before we get
The reason why this is before the board is it would be a change to an approved stormwater management permit. And part of the stormwater regs say that if a change is made, the developer or the applicant can write a letter to the planning board stating what the change is, and then the planning board can determine whether it is a significant change or not a significant change. If it's not a significant change, it's essentially an administrative change. We go about our merry way. If it's the board determines it's a significant change, they can require an amended stormwater management permit application to address that change. So this is before the board to make the determination as to whether this is a significant change or not a significant change.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gelsich. And I know that Beta has reviewed this. So, Mr. Paradise, do you want to?
Sure. This is a very minor issue. Virtually changing it to a swale just means you lose the sump in the catch basin, which is the sediment control device. However, this whole swale ends up within the catchment of the the gas containment area. So it's not going to go anywhere. It has to be pumped out. So it's not likely to be a big issue.
Okay, and I'm just going to ask one question for you, Phil, before we go to comments and questions from the board. How might this change impact overflow or runoff into the adjacent wetlands?
So it's going to the same place than it was before. It's just going to move the sediment down line. So the sediment's not likely to leave the catchment area. Anything, that would settle out. So overflow would just would be fairly clean. So
what is it? Can you elaborate? What does fairly clean mean? I mean, how does it actually? I just want to make sure I understand how this.
So a sump only collects what is physically heavy enough to fall out of the water. So obviously it's going to be over the ground, and whatever pollutants it can catch up, which aren't heavy enough to fall out, will still remain in the storm water. But the net result of losing the sump in this will not have a significant impact on that pollutant load. So that makes sense.
Okay. I see Fran has his hand raised. Fran, go ahead.
Through the chair, Phil, was this the only other option available to do this trench? Was there anything else that could be done? Or was there anything else considered, I should say, as an option?
That was the only thing that was offered. So I don't know that, again, I don't know that the sump in a catch basin isn't very big. But it is enough to, you know, in a cleaning effort to capture the sediment flow, but it's going to end up in the catchment area for the fuel.
Do you
So
want-
it's not. Say that again. You want to show us where it is?
I'd be happy to comment on it if you'd.
Sure.
Sure, please, Mr. Blackburn.
So we didn't offer any other alternative. We really didn't have a means of capturing that stormwater in that location without either the catch basin or the trench. However, this entire flow goes down through the spill trench, which I think was the second picture. And that conveys down to kind of the north side of tank B, which is the center tank. So not only do you have that kind of trenchway there where we do have sediment that tends to kind of fall out on the side edges where I guess the velocities would be a little bit lower, but it all drains into a sub impoundment, which is probably a 10-foot square impoundment, which then has to get pumped over into the main impoundment, which is that large multi-acre impoundment area. And then ultimately that flows to the further north, which is where it then is discharged into the intermittent stream area there. So you've got two impoundments that this has to go through. So I know we've had issues with sediment in the past, but that did not convey through this system. That was related to the stormwater that drains out onto Wilson Street. That's kind of partially the town's and partially our system. So I just want to make sure that it's understood. This actually does go through two impoundments before it even gets to the discharge location.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Right, are there other questions or comments from the board? And then we will, I expect we might have some public comment on this. So we'll start with the board.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Deb.
So who came in and who said that it needed to be larger? So the drain is being enlarged, and was it clogging up? Was it, so what is the reason for the change?
No, it has nothing to do with how the drain was functioning from a stormwater perspective. It's the Pipeline Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. Essentially, this is the fueling area, and they didn't want natural gas to potentially get caught in the sump of the catch basin. And that could be a hazardous situation. So that's the requirement.
So can I follow that one up? So it's not hazardous if it ends up into the catchment basins. So it's hazardous in the upper level, but it's not hazardous in the lower level.
So
Yeah.
You've got to remember that this is to convey LNG, so liquid natural gas. And so the intention is to convey it to the sub impoundment and the impoundment area, because that's designed in order to hold LNG in case of a large spill. The issue with this stormwater catch basin was that it was going to hold some volume of LNG up at the truck unloading area during a spill. And the intent is to convey it away from the vehicle. So if the vehicle had a spill of LNG, we want to move that away from the vehicle so that if there was a fire or something, it wouldn't continue to fuel it. But because of the way the impoundment basins have the overflow on them, you have to fill the volume of that basin first before it can overflow into this trench. And so that was PHMSA's issue with that, is you'd have some amount of fuel that basically inherently couldn't move away from the area to a safe location.
So the interior of that catch basin is sloped, so it provides easier removal. Is that as well as the size increase?
No. So the catch basin will go away altogether, and instead we'll just have a trench. So where that red square is on the rectangle there on the screen, that will just be an open trench. So it'll just have grading on top of it. So if there was a spill in the truck unloading area, it'll drain into the trench and then convey over the side of the wall into the spill trench and away from the area. Whereas previously the catch basin would have filled with that liquid. Some volume of it would have to fill up first before it started to overflow through that black pipe there. So
okay,
they're trying to convey, so we don't have any amount of liquid that remains in the area if there was a spill. They want to get it away from the vehicle.
Okay, thank you.
All right, are there any further questions from the board? And if not, then are there any questions or
Excuse me, I'm
comments?
sorry, Gary. This is Muriel. I just want to ask Katie Towner's question. We got an email from her. Is it possible that there's any concern that we are being less protective about the reservoir?
So I guess I'd go back to what was discussed earlier in that the this flows through two other impoundments before it's discharged over towards the stream. So there is ample opportunity for sediments still to settle out without the catch basin there.
I appreciate the answer, but my question was really more directly, is there a chance that we are being less protective of the reservoir? By not having a catchment basin at the initial spot? It doesn't necessarily have to be where it can't be in terms of safety, but do we need that catchment basin or one soon after that, that short trench, so that we're being as protective as possible of the reservoir?
So the catch basin only provides, I'll say, nominal water quality improvements. It does offer some opportunity for some sediments to settle out, but a catch basin isn't in and of itself a water quality like treatment BMP. So what would happen in the catch basin is, what we expect to happen in the impoundments before it's released to the, to the environment, so that there's that opportunity for whatever's in that stormwater coming from that catch basin. My understanding from the PHMSA requirements is that we wouldn't be able to put in a sump, which is kind of that treatment part of the catch basin anywhere along this line where there might be LNG that could collect it.
I want to ask Muriel's question to Mr. Paradise, because I just want to hear his perspective. Could you respond to Muriel's question, Bill?
So, as with anything, you can always provide more protections. The more money you spend, or the more, but I tend to agree that for one catch basin in a system where there are down gradient, I don't know you want to call it redundancies, but opportunities for the sediment to be captured prior to discharge to the wetland system. I don't think it's going to be significant.
Okay, so I think we've got two pathways here. Option number one is that we take a vote as to whether we consider this to be minor and that no amended application is necessary. Option two is that we determine it to be substantial, at which point we would ask them to amend their application and we would have a more comprehensive discussion around this. Just worth noting that for what it's worth is that our principal planner previously recommended that we determine this to be minor, and Mr. Paradise also doesn't anticipate any significant impact here. That being said, I'll tell you, I'm personally a little cautious here because we've had a history of issues with regards to how this stormwater is managed and what happens when it leaves the site. So I'm personally a little cautious here, but for the board, just curious, and I'm sensitive to time here. If we want to discuss this more, then I think we've got to defer it to a later point in time, but love to hear your thoughts on which of those two pathways you see as the best fit. Jane?
I would refer back to our experts who we pay very well to give us advice and go with their recommendation.
Anybody feel counter to that? Mary?
Oh, I'm sorry, I raised my hand before you asked for the counter. I agree with Jane.
Okay. All right, so then on that note, I guess, any other further thoughts from folks?
I have sort of a contribution that sort of answers some of that hesitancy you might feel, Gary, because we had some previous explanations about these basins and how they operate that I think Jim and Tracy had commented earlier that, you know, unfortunately the LNG, a lot of it dissipates into the air and the solids work it their way out, but the basins in the size that they are more than substantial enough to compensate in the materials that are, you know, sort of on the sides of them.
Yep.
I think where we got into trouble was with the fire foam experiment, which was something that they're no longer doing. And so I just wanted to clarify that for the audience, for people who are listening and who are concerned that there's just difference. It's a different situation entirely.
All right, so on that note, I am going to entertain a motion to determine that this change as requested by the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration be considered a minor change and that no amended application is necessary.
I will make that motion. This is Muriel.
And I'll second that.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Question, Gary?
Yes.
I'm not sure of the process, but is this a public hearing that we need to hear from the crowd?
It is not a public hearing.
Okay, just want to double check. Thanks.
And I did ask for comments, and I think that Muriel rightfully raised the primary question from Ms. Towner.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll go ahead and take a vote on that. We'll start with Rob Benson.
Rob Benson, yes.
Muriel?
Muriel Kramer, yes.
Jane?
Jane Marin, yes.
Dave?
Dave Paul, yes.
Mary?
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Deb?
Deborah Feinberg, yes.
Sundar?
Sundar Sivaram, yes.
Fran?
Randy Young, yes.
And Gary Trendle is a yes. So, thanks, folks. Appreciate your comments and responsiveness there. All right, so I'm going to actually, just in interest of time, because I know we have a lot of people here, I'm going to hold off on the minutes until the end of the meeting.
I'm sorry, do we have to, we voted that it was a minor change. Do we have to take another vote? Or is it all set?
I'm
sorry.
John.
What would the other vote be?
I didn't know if we had to accept the change. I know we accepted it was a minor change. I'm sorry for interrupting the process.
No other vote as
okay.
Good question. I hear what you're saying. So I think we're good there. So let's go ahead and move to Cornell's. And I see Miss Scanlon on the line. Thank you for joining us this evening. And I know that this is a continued hearing of which I think there's been some further action, in particular from the Design Review Board. I will say that we do have a official process here, but maybe Ms. Scanlon, just to start, if you can give us the 60-second intro as to what you are looking to do with this application.
Hi, good evening. I'm asking for a permanent 6-foot white PVC fence to be installed in the back of Cornell's Irish Pub, where the temporary fencing is right now. There will be lighting, there'll be exit signs, and then there'll be bollards around all the new fencing where the parking spots are to prevent anyone from driving into the new fence. And that's basically what I'm asking for.
Okay, thank you. John, any further updates on this from your end?
No, but I will say Design Review Board recommended approval. They did not recommend any changes to the application. on their recommendation for approval. And I think Ms. Scanlon gave some good background at Design Review Board as to what the fence is going to be, what the lighting is going to be, and that there are going to be bollards. And I think Ms. Scanlon left out the lighting that's proposed is string lighting interior to the fence, if that's correct.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you, John. So from a process perspective, we've got quite a few steps here. I think what I'd like to do is just go through these very quickly. I'm a hopeful, and if there are comments or questions along the way, please either raise your hand or for members of the board, go ahead and speak up. But the next item on the list would be a detailed discussion on decision criteria. And I know that John has already reviewed his assessment of that decision criteria. Are there any other comments related to the site plan standards specific to this application?
Through the chair.
Yes, Fran.
And I didn't see it, maybe I missed it. Is there any reference to noise on the standard itself? I saw some reference to other criteria. I just didn't know if that was covered there, or maybe here I'm getting ahead of myself on some of the.
Yes, there is.
Yeah, I remember seeing it, and I'm just looking through it right now.
Okay.
Yeah, can I speak?
Yes, please. Go ahead, Ms. Scanlon.
The select board, when they approved my new license, they approved it with a condition that at 10 p.m. the music has to be turned down low on the new outdoor patio.
Got it. And low is defined as not. Did they define low, Ms. Scanlon?
No, no, they didn't. Well, just not blaring loud music. They said they wanted to turn down low at 10 p.m.
That's
I would assume
easily
that
enforceable.
The basis of my question through the chair, the basis of the question is really just for any butters, so that the noise isn't spilling over. And I think probably maybe that was the framework that the select board was operating under, but I won't presume anything.
Fran, there is, if you look at the section G, 2.5 section G, the site plan shall show measures to reduce and abate noise and odors generated from the site that will impact surrounding properties.
Noise and odors. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And just a reminder, our planner comments was that no new noise issues are anticipated, as this is an existing use and will be screened by a fence. Any other questions from the board?
Not a question, just a comment.
Yes.
That if there was a concern from an abutter, they could certainly call the police. And I'm sure Ms. Scanlon would turn down the volume quickly.
Yes, we would. We know the neighbor and we work with him as much as possible.
Yes, that's what I've heard.
Okay. And I see there are no requested waivers. Is that correct? Ms. Scanlon, you're not requesting any waivers, correct?
Oh, no, sorry. I didn't realize. Yes, no waivers.
Okay. And as far as we've been through the decision criteria, John, do we need to discuss the site plan standards any more than we already have?
You would want to discuss the site plan standards if there is a concern with not meeting one of the standards, I would think. If it's thought that all the standards are met, then probably does not warrant any further discussion.
Okay. I'm comfortable that it meets the site plan standards. Are there any comments from the board that we should discuss in further detail?
No.
Okay. And then from a finance perspective, effectively what we would be voting on is that the proposed development conforms to the site plan standards and provisions of Article 20, and that all applicable criteria and standards set forth in the zoning bylaws, Chapter 210, have been satisfied. Are there any other findings of merit that we should consider here? Okay. Lastly, we do have a number of proposed conditions, and John, tell me if otherwise, but I do need to read through these out loud. Is that correct?
Were they read aloud last meeting? I don't remember if they were. If they weren't, then yes. If they were, then you could read through the new ones.
I'm going to defer to Rob on that because I don't remember either. And I was, while I watched it, I was not a part of the discussion.
I do not recall reading through all the decision criteria.
I don't think we did.
I don't think we did.
Okay. All right. Then let
We
me...
had just more of a general discussion at that time.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to quickly read through these. And then from a process perspective, I'll read through the proposed conditions. Then we can go ahead and vote on the findings, vote on the conditions, and then close the hearing. So that's slightly out of order, but I think it's a little bit cleaner that way. So here we go, my favorite part, proposed conditions. Number one, the Director of Municipal Inspections inspects projects under construction for compliance with the approved decision of site plan review. This includes the driveway, roadway, and infrastructure construction shown in the plan. If the Director of Municipal Inspections determines at any time before or during construction that a registered professional engineer or other such outside professional is required to assist with the inspections of the stormwater management system or other component of the site plan, the applicant shall be responsible for the cost of those inspections. 2, all construction activities shall adhere to the applicable local, state, and federal laws and regulations regarding noise, vibration, dust, sedimentation, and the use of interference with or blocking of town roads. 3, the applicant shall be responsible for mitigating all construction-related impacts, including erosion, siltation, and dust control. The applicant shall maintain all portions of any public way used for construction access free of soil, mud, or debris deposited due to use by construction vehicles associated with the project, and shall regularly sweep such areas as directed by the Director of Municipal Inspections in consultation with the DPW Director. 4, the applicant shall regularly remove construction trash and debris from the site in accordance with good construction practice and the construction management plan. No tree stumps, demolition material, trash, or debris shall be burned or buried on the site. 5, all existing lighting within the development project, whether shown in the approved site plan or required by the Massachusetts State Building Code, shall be shielded, directed downward and not upward or outward, and shall not spill onto the adjacent property. 6, all fixed mechanical equipment on the site shall be screened from view from the ground. Such screening shall be sufficient in the opinion of the Director of Municipal Inspections. 7, all dumpsters on site shall be screened from view from the ground by a 6-foot tall solid fence or other effective means adequate in the opinion of the Director of Municipal Inspections. 8, if construction is not commenced within 3 years of the date of filing of the site plan decision with the town clerk, approval shall be automatically rescinded unless such time is extended by the board. For the purpose of this condition, the term commenced shall mean the commencement of site work. 9, assigned construction management plan shall be submitted to the planning board prior to the commencement of any site work. The applicant shall also submit a revised full site plan, which incorporates all the modifications made during the public hearing process and any required in this decision. 10, erosion and sedimentation control measures shall be implemented during the construction period in accordance with the approved site plan and the construction management plan. If they are found to be inadequate, the applicant shall immediately correct any deficiencies. 11, the planning board shall receive a sign-off confirming that the site contractor and any major subcontractors have received the construction management plan prior to the commencement of any site work. 12, construction may occur only between the hours of 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Monday through Friday and Saturdays between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. pursuant to Chapter 141, Article I of the Town of Hopkinton General Bylaws. 13, the applicant shall submit final as-built plans to the planning board prior to the issuance of certificate of occupancy. 14, the applicant developer shall provide the principal planner with a project point of contact and contact information prior to the issuance of the building permit. The point of contact information shall be kept current throughout correspondence to the principal planner until the final certificate of occupancy is issued or construction is otherwise considered complete. 15, bollards or other barrier systems shall be installed in conformance with generally accepted design standards for the parking spaces that abut the proposed addition. The applicant shall coordinate with the police and fire departments to ensure these barrier systems are installed appropriately. And 16, the applicant shall install a vinyl privacy fence at least 6 feet in height to surround the proposed outdoor seating area in order to mitigate noise and visual impacts of the proposed addition. Any other conditions to consider from the board? Okay. then on that note, I will entertain a motion that the board finds the proposed development conforms to the site plan standards and provisions of Article 20, and that all applicable criteria and standards set forth in the zoning bylaws have been satisfied.
So moved.
This is- I'll second it. This is Muriel.
All right, thanks, Deb and Muriel. If there's no further discussion, then we will move to a vote on the findings. And we'll start with Rob Benson.
Rob Benson, yes.
Muriel?
Muriel Kramer, yes.
Jane?
Jane Murray, yes.
Dave?
And Paul, yes.
Mary?
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Deb?
Deborah Feinberg, yes.
Sundar?
Sundar Subramanian, yes.
Fran?
Randy Young, yes.
And Gary Trundle's a yes. All right. Then we will, I will entertain a motion that the board grant approval of the site plan under Article 20 of the zoning bylaws, subject to the conditions that were previously read aloud.
Rob Benson, so moved.
Randy Young, second.
All right, Rob with the motion, Fran with the second. Assuming no further discussion.
I'm sorry. I just want to make sure, I don't think anybody has suggested they want to comment, but we should always ask if there's anybody in the public that came to speak to this.
Sure. Fair request. I have been monitoring the hand raised, but are there any members of the public that would like to comment before we take our final votes on approving this permit? All right, seeing none, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, then we'll vote. Rob?
Rob Benson, yes.
Muriel?
Muriel Kramer, yes.
Jane?
Jane Marin, yes.
Dave?
And Paul, yes.
Mary?
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Deb?
Deb Feinberg, yes.
Sundar?
Sundar Subramanian, yes.
Fran?
Randy Young, yes.
And Gary Trendle is a yes. And then lastly, we will just, I'll entertain a motion to close this public hearing.
Rob
So moved.
Benson, so moved.
Seconded, Sundar.
All right, Rob with the second, Sundar with the Rob with the motion, Sundar with the second. Assuming no further discussion, Rob, how do you vote?
Rob Benson, yes.
Muriel?
Muriel Kramer, yes.
Jane?
Jane Marin, yes.
Dave?
And Paul, yes.
Mary?
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Deb?
Deborah Feinberg, yes.
Sundar?
Sundar Subramanian, yes.
Fran?
Randy Young, yes.
And Gary Trendle is a yes. So thank you, Ms. Scanlon, and good luck with your construction.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay. Next up on our agenda is proposed amendments to solar special permit over on Wilson Street. So do we have the applicant from Atlantic and/or Grasshopper?
Good evening.
I see Chris
Yes.
King.
Mr. Chair, this is Ahmed Hafiz. I'm here, yes, from Grasshopper. And Chris King from Atlantic is on the call as well.
Okay. And can we unmute Chris? Hopefully.
So he has to unmute himself. I've asked
Okay.
that he unmute himself, but I
All
can't.
And I guess between Ahmed and Chris.
I apologize. I apologize. I didn't realize I was muted. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chris King with Atlantic Design Engineers. As noted, we're here before you this evening to request a modification to the special permit that was granted by the board back in March of 2019. We're back before you this evening with a different, since the project was approved by the town, a different owner/operator has acquired the project, and that's Grasshopper Energy. And on the phone with me this evening as well as Ahmed Hafez. He's the head of EPC, which is Engineering, Procurement, and Construction with Grasshopper. Similar to most solar projects, once the engineering and really the procurement process begins, that's when the equipment is purchased and the final electrical and structural designs are completed well after the land permits are secured.
So Mr. King,
And so,
hey Chris.
yes.
Sorry, gonna, I think we're all pretty familiar with the project, but I'm wondering if maybe you can just kind of summarize why you are back in front of us with this proposed amendment to what was previously approved.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. We had revised the layout, reached out to John Gelsich, who thought that the changes warranted coming back to the board. The changes include basically a restructuring of the racking system to create the layout that's shown before you. There's a little different row-to-row spacing, a slightly different module count, but still within, the threshold approved by the board, if you will. We're still using the same footprint. We're not asking for any additional clearing. We're proposing the same landscaping. And while we restrung, they call it, the array and the racking, we've also relocated the access road that's inside of the project. If you remember, it used to run central through the Wilson Street portion of the array, and now we've located that up along the northern edge. That just allows us to really maximize the efficiency of the remaining footprint. And with the relocation of the access road, we were also tasked with relocating and revising Stormwater Basin 1C, which is located in that vicinity. And so we had done all that. We had provided drainage calculations demonstrating that the drainage design as approved as approved by the board, including the small revision to Basin 1C, is adequate. And that was issued by Beta. We know that they did issue a review letter, which we feel was fairly clean, acknowledging that the changes in fact minor and that the stormwater is adequate. They did bring up one question regarding the viability of the seed mix growing beneath the panels, to which we've provided supplemental information, including pictures of other projects with panels that are close together, as well as a shading study that demonstrates that no matter what kind of racking system you have, there's always going to be a portion beneath the panel that is 100% shaded all of the time. And we, again, a shading study specific to a project. We do have pictures of that project showing that grass is growing within those areas that are shaded 100% of the time. And so we feel we've provided documentation, basically demonstrating that the grass mix will grow beneath the panels. So it's really the change to the access road itself and the stormwater basin. That's why we're not only asking for a modification to the special permit, but also to the stormwater permit as well. And then we've also, again, based on final sizes of equipment, restructured and resized the equipment pads, still generally basically located in the same area that was approved by the planning board, again, back in March of 2019.
So Mr. King, just going back to my original question, because it seems like a fair amount of work here in terms of new racking systems, relocated road, new stormwater plan. What's prompting the changes?
So when Grasshopper acquired the project, like any developer, they take a look at what was permitted and they try to figure out, can they do better? Can they maximize efficiency? And so it was determined that by relocating the access road to the north, as it's shown on the plans that were recently resubmitted, they're able to basically fit more modules in. As everyone know, the project, for a number of different reasons, realized significant panel count losses throughout the final stages of permitting. And this was a way that Grasshopper thought that they could make it up internally, while not expanding the footprint that was essentially approved by the town.
Thank you. All right.
You're welcome.
Let's move forward to the staff report. John, do you want to share with us your comments?
Sure. So all of you are probably familiar with this project. I fortunately missed it. I was hired like a month after it was approved. So I have gotten an education in this project in the last few months. But it's been a good education, I should say. So I think Chris kind of went over all of the changes. We've been looking at the impacts to the stormwater system. We've been looking at the impacts to screening. We've been looking at the impacts to wetlands. That's really focused on Concom, which they're currently in the process of discussing the changes before Concom. I think Chris kind of captured everything. I didn't have too many outstanding comments. One of the things that we were talking about offline was the screening in the northern area, which is, if you can see my cursor up here. There was a concern on my part that the species were not named. There's a chart showing what species would be planted, but not the location of those species. So it's difficult to see what the screening would actually look like in those areas. But as I understand it, that was discussed at the previous approval, and that will be taken care of through me, the property owner at 14 and 15 Wilson Street after the approval, in concert with the applicant's landscape architect, once they do the grading, once they do the work on site and figure out what will actually work best. So that was one of the major concerns that we had, but I think that is answered. The other concern that we were discussing today with Phil, and I'm going to look to him to weigh in on this, and Chris mentioned it in his discussion, is the close proximity of all the panels may shield sunlight reaching the ground below, which will inhibit vegetative growth. So we just wanted confirmation that we're not going to have dirt underneath these panels, which will impact the stormwater calculations. They sent photos over of existing solar systems that are in that same type of pattern with vegetation growing underneath. They had done this in the past, but Phil, I think rightly so, was concerned that they weren't the same density, so it wasn't a one-for-one comparison. But I'm going to just give it over to Phil right now, because I think that's going to be the main concern here, is as to whether the vegetation will actually be a problem or not.
Mr. Curtis.
Thank you. John, can I share my screen or?
Yes, let me stop sharing. All right, Phil, you should be able to share your screen.
All right, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So, so the typical solar array racking systems are similar to this, and I think even the previous version of this was similar in that the spacing, there's probably almost equal spacing between the coverage of the panels themselves and then open space between them. There's a certain angle here. This one says 25 degrees. It's in that kind of range. So you can get the most impact from the sunlight. So the challenge is that they are pretty aggressive in terms of their layout and panel, the new panel things. It's very economic in terms of just the amount of panels they can put on the land and the spacing. If you can see this, there's about a 3-foot area between them, and it's about a 12-foot area that's panels. And so this is the first time I've seen, and also the angle is only 10 degrees, so it's fairly flat, it's fairly low, and it covers quite a bit of space. And if you get sunlight at an angle, there's just a little bit of sun that's going to hit the ground in between the panels. And so we just wanted to make sure that the coverage in the land, or at least the soil, would be stable between underneath the panels. These are D soils, and we know from our legacy and experienced that the soils can be a pain relative to sediment and erosion. And so so we just want to make sure that the soils can either sustain growth or be stabilized by some other means long term. So we've had some back and forth, and unfortunately, the only examples that we've been seeing are more in this kind of setting where there's the ability to get light in there, either reflected or otherwise off and the growth. So we just want to make sure that this is going to work. If they do construct this and it doesn't work, there's very little space to get any kind of machinery in here and ability to rectify it in the future. So we just kind of want to make sure it's constructed well from the beginning. So.
Okay, thanks, Phil. And then, so I think two primary, I guess really three things for us to think about here. One is the change in racking, which I think you guys just went through in quite a bit of detail, and we'll talk about that more. The second is impact of the road change, and I know that we had some comments from the abutters that are concerned about how that might affect runoff and screening and whatnot. And in your review, just wondering if you had any concerns about that, the change, and not to mention that Wilson Street's a scenic road. I know we talked a lot specifically about the location previously, but do you have any comments on or concerns about the road location change? And then the third one would be the stormwater changes. So
I was not aware that the project changed in 2019. The amount of existing tree canopy that's going to remain between Wilson Street and the solar system is always a good thing. I don't know how thick it is relative to evergreens and how that would be
sorry,
covered, but.
Maybe I misspoke, but I'm just referring to the location of the road and how that might affect.
So the road is not going to be a visual thing. It's going to be obviously low, and the road itself is not to be traveled frequently. It's once or twice a month, I think, or so okay. I don't so I don't think the road visually has an issue. They are providing, we did have them extend the swale so that would capture any runoff from that road in the drainage system. So I don't think that's going to be an issue either. So.
All right, thank you. All right. So I think that, were there any other staff reports, John? And I guess I have one question for you, John. I don't know if you can pull this up while we continue our conversation, but what do we have? Do we have a specific condition around pollinator-friendly mix that in this particular one? I know we've talked about that in subsequent commercial solar applications, but I just want to understand if this would potentially be limiting a previously agreed to condition.
I don't know if there's a pollinator condition in the decision. I can take a look at that. Might take me a minute or two.
Okay, if you could, that would be great. Thank you. So just really quickly, as far as the decision criteria goes, planning board may issue such special permit, or before the planning board may issue such special permit, it shall determine each of the following. One, that the commercial solar photovoltaic installation conforms to the provisions of this article. Two, the commercial solar photovoltaic installation will not be detrimental to the neighborhood or town. And three, environmental features of the site and surrounding areas are protected, and specifically surrounding areas will be protected from the proposed use by provisions of adequate surface water drainage. So that's effectively what we are looking at here. And John, please interrupt me when you find the approval from 2019.
So I'm reading through the conditions right now. I don't see anything. I haven't gotten to the end. But there is a condition that it needs to conform with the landscaping plan, and I would have to check the landscaping plan to see if it mentions a pollinator seed mix within there.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please go ahead.
This is Ahmed Hafiz. We are applying for the UMass program, the pollinator mix, the pollinator qualification. We will qualify the site for the UMass program for pollinator friendly site. Okay.
Thank you. That's great to hear. And I guess my concern though is I just look at the drawings that Mr. Paradise showed. It seems like there's not a whole lot of space for pollinators to grow. And again, I'm going to defer to our professional engineer here, but just intuitively seems like that's going to be problematic compared to what we've reviewed in the past. And so that's where I was just looking for a little bit of history as to what we approved. And my opinion, the previous approval should really sort of drive our evaluation moving forward. John, you're looking at me. Did you find anything further?
I didn't see anything. I can't promise that I caught everything, especially within the plans, but I don't see anything specifically mentioning a pollinator mix. But again, that doesn't mean that there's not.
Okay.
Through the chair, Gary.
Yes, go ahead, Rob.
The issue seems to be sunlight. We're talking about a solar array, and the issue, if the solar panels are covering 82% of a given area, obviously nothing's going to grow. Like there may be some sunlight that at certain angles gets a little bit under it, but there's going to be 50% or more of that array that's probably not going to grow anything because there just won't be sunlight underneath solar panels.
Yep. I understand, and that's why I was looking to see if there was a previous condition that specified the pollinator mix and the need for that. So
through the chair.
Yes, go ahead,
Is
Jane.
it something that we could add in the language that would speak to low sun pollinators? I know just stating pollinators is a very broad term, but if we narrow it down to doing some research into low sun pollinators or grasses or seed mixtures or something else that would contain the soils and invigorate it somehow, because there are a lot of plants and grasses that will grow in low shade or sun, but I don't think we've actually tackled this as a planning board.
Yeah, Mr. Hafez.
Yes, that's a good point, Ms. Moran. And the seed mix that we have also sent a copy of to Beta. There are three types of seed mixes. One is for a shade mix that will grow under the panels, and it's specifically for the shaded areas. And one is for a sun mix, which is outside of the shaded areas. And one is a conservation mix, which is outside, like in the surrounding area around the fence. So yes, you are right. There is a shade seed mix, and this is what we have proposed for under the panels.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Sorry, Jane, go ahead.
I was just wondering if they could just identify some of the species, like maybe some clovers or some other low-growing plants and grasses that would grow in low shade.
Yes, excuse me, this is Nick Mastinka with Goddard Consulting. I'm working with the applicant on this, and he asked me to look through the seed mix table that he was proposing to put underneath the solar panels. So as a wetland scientist, I have a pretty good understanding of plants and their shade tolerance and their drought tolerance. So I reviewed his table that he gave me, and there are a few, most of them are shade tolerant species, including the clover that you talked about. There's, let me just find it. Well, oh, slender bush clover is just one of the shade tolerant species in the mix. And you know, there's, I think I counted 23 of the species in there. They're either shade tolerant or drought tolerant, some more than others. And whatever plants don't happen to take underneath the solar panels, some other plant will. It's, you know, the way the plants compete for light. Some will thrive under there, some may not. I assess the percentage of each plant in the mixture, and there's a good mix of shade tolerant plants that do have a very good chance of growing underneath those panels.
Okay.
One more question.
Sure, Jane.
Can you tell me what the soil conditions are going to be at the end of the result when you put in the panels? Would they be tolerant to accepting seeds? Or is it just going to be, you know, something that's not, that they couldn't grow in, like a, you know, a gravel mix? Or is it going to be something more substantial that would be topsoil?
Yeah, the plan would be to put topsoil beneath the panels to make the growing conditions as suitable as possible. And most of these species are known to be able to tolerate dry or medium to dry soil conditions, which is what we'll have under the panels.
Great. And just to follow up, when would the seeding take place? Because I know that like this is a really good time of the year to throw seed mixture out when, you know, in just before spring when it's still wet and things can grow. So I'd hate to just see it thrown out there in the middle of the summer when it's dry, if it could be planned so that it would be more substantially acceptable. Really, that would be a comfortable solution to me.
Yep. So we submitted a land management plan to Conservation Commission, which kind of outlines a bunch of timing stuff in relation to the seed mixes. So we've, you know, even proposed, you know, cover crops in the meantime before the solar panels are out. But ideally, we put the seed mix in a dormant time, late October to December, before snowpack and before the soils freeze, to get the seeds into the soil with good contact with the soil, let them stay dormant over winter time, and in the spring they can, you know, start growing right away.
Well, that sounds really like a comfortable solution to me. Thank you.
Yep.
Before we move on to the road change, are there any other questions with regards to the racking? I see Fran's hand raised.
So to the chair, and this is more directed to Phil. Phil, have you had an opportunity, two-part question, have you had an opportunity to look at the seed mix options that the applicant, that the engineer just talked about there? And B, let's say worst case scenario that none of the seed really takes. You know, I guess the concern is there any fallback plan that they could potentially implement, right? The worst thing would be that, you know, you've got significant runoff because, you know, the soil, there's been no grasses that to cover. So
you kind of have two conditions under those panels. You have the space where all the water is running right onto,
right.
And then you have all the space that is not going to get any water unless there is surface runoff to go underneath the solar panels, just given the solar panels are not permeable. So I guess the first question is for Phil.
Yep.
And if you've had a chance to review that, and then the second question for the applicant is what happens if the seed doesn't take.
Correct.
So Phil, we'll start with you.
So we did do some research through the internet here, and we note that Scott's, a well-known distributor of seed, has a shade-tolerant grasses that need at least 3 to 4 hours of direct sunlight, or 4 to 6 hours of dapple sunlight per day. So, and I think if Scott's had a completely shade-tolerant mix, they would be selling it. But that's just my personal view. And also in other contexts, there's different shade amounts, and there's full shade, which is less than an hour of direct sunlight, and then there's dense shade, which are the two worst conditions where there's virtually no direct sunlight. And they offer that decorative mulches and ground covers are good alternatives to the dense shade areas. So I think I'm not a landscape architect. I did have our landscape architect Scott review it, and he was very skeptical that these things could grow in no sunlight.
Okay.
So, and the second thing is that you're correct. This is a very varied varied terrain relative to topography. The water's going to run off the panels and flow in different directions based on so there may be areas that don't get any water at all. So it may be difficult for them to grow as well in some areas. So.
Okay. And then to the applicant, what happens when the seed doesn't take?
So this is Mitch. So since we're going for the gold certification, with the pollinator certification, we would want to reseed and do our best to make sure the seed takes. That was our plan B for now, and we'll be out there for 3 to 5 years for conservation, doing the same thing just outside the solar panel area. So I'd be out there 5 times a year monitoring just outside the solar panels anyway. So keeping in underneath the solar panels to, maybe spot check and throw seed mix down in a few spot areas would probably suffice.
I'll try to be quick. Do you understand what John Gelchik said about place?
Sorry, Ed, hang on one second. But are there any other questions or comments from the board specific to these racking changes and the impact they might have? Yep, sorry, Dave, I know you raised your hand. Go ahead.
Oh, thanks. Question for the applicant. The last notes I had was that this was a 2.5 megawatt installation, and that it covered 11 acres. So what would the new numbers be?
Is 2.4 megawatts right now, and it covers like the fenced area is 7.5 acres.
So, sorry, just through you, Mr. Chair. So what's the change in the size of the solar array from what it currently is at and what they're proposing?
This is Chris with Atlantic again for clarity. The footprint did not change. So if it was previously at the 11 acres, then it's that has not changed. It's still within the 11 acres. It's still the 11 acres.
Okay, through you, Mr. Chair, just in terms of megawatts, before and after.
It's Mr. Paul, it's 2.46 exactly right now, megawatts. It used to be 2.5 or something. Now it's 2.46.
So you're not increasing it at all?
No, we're not, no. it's less now than before.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I think, what I'm hoping to do here, go ahead, Mariel.
I'm sorry. The only question I have, there's a really sophisticated plan to do the racking in such a way that it preserved artifacts, historical artifacts, Native American artifacts. And will any of these changes impact that plan?
No, it does not impact that plan for the ceremonial stones on site. We are talking to the tribe right now, and they have seen all the surveys that we've done, and they will be working with us throughout the construction to monitor the construction to make sure the ceremonial stones are preserved.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
And Mariel, just to note, there was a letter in the packet from the tribe just to comment that that the applicant was continuing to work with them.
So I apologize. What I saw were attempts to reach representatives. I did not see that had happened.
For the chair, the email was received today. So it was added today.
Okay.
And
then, shoot.
Ms. Kramer, you're right. We've had we've tried for a very long time to get answers from them, and then very recently they answered us and they started talking to us. And
I'm delighted to hear that. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just one more quick follow-up.
Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
So I believe when you asked the question of why this was being done, one of the reasons given was to put in more panels. So I guess I want to revisit the question of why this was being done. To the applicant.
So this is Chris with Atlantic again. When we, as a civil engineer, my background certainly is not electrical. When we go ahead and permit these, we make assumptions as the civil engineers, assumptions that can vary the actual production of the project as a whole. But we do our best to make it as close to what we think is going to be built out there. I know that on a site like this where we realize significant, areas where we're removing panels and significant losses, if you will, the panel wattage was probably increased to still maintain the 2.5 megawatt. When, like I said, when the grasshopper comes in and does their final design, they may not elect to go with a higher wattage panel. They may go with a lower wattage panel, or a different arrangement of the inverters might result in some changes electrically that, we're not privy to when the project, is securing its land use permits, if you will, at the initial phases of the project.
Okay, through you, Mr. Chair, what I'm hearing is that perhaps they put in more panels with less wattage to maintain the same size array.
Yeah, and I would say too that I think it's useful context for us, but I go back to our decision criteria. One is that the solar photovoltaic installation conforms to the provisions of this article. Two, that the installation will not be detrimental to the neighborhood or town. Three, that environmental features of the site and surrounding areas are protected, and specifically surrounding areas will be protected from the proposed use by provision of adequate surface water drainage. And then on the stormwater front, that the proposed plan meets stormwater standards. So I just want to sort of keep that in mind, and just as I just sort of refreshing myself with our current Article 31 commercial solar photovoltaic installations bylaw, there's nothing specifically in this that calls out necessary spacing between panels or enabling certain types of growth or anything like that. So that's in a nutshell kind of how I'm approaching this. Are there any other, Mr. Cutter, I don't know if you had a comment specific to the racking style change, and what I want to do is let's get through the racking discussion, then we can talk about the road and the stormwater. But were there any other specific questions or comments with regards to the racking changes? And if you're in the public, you can go ahead and raise your hand. Either wave at us there. I see Mr. Cutter has his hand raised. So
He's muted.
yep. Mr. Cutter, can you unmute yourself, or is that John? I suppose actually I can too, since
Does that work?
I'm a co-presenter. Sorry.
Am I unmuted?
We hear you, Mr. Cutter. If you can
Okay.
Introduce yourself and your address.
I'm Ed Cutter. I live at 21 Wilson Street. My southern border is about 150 feet north from where the panels are to be constructed on higher land and with limited trees in between. I was going to ask John, I might not have understood I didn't understand what he said. There was some issue that in the prior landscaping plans, there was no designation as to where the items that were listed would be located. John, did I hear you say that's been resolved, or can you help me with that?
Sure. So in the previous decision, there was a condition that the applicant and their landscape architect will meet with the principal planner and the owner of 14 and 15 Wilson Street to discuss the screening. And then there's provisions for additional screening if it's not sufficient.
Well, neither one of those is me, if that's proper English. And in the northern area, it's shown that there are 2 rows. There are 2 or 3 row depths of trees. And I thought that had always been understood. That's 64 trees all together. And I might ask Chris King if he would join in. I thought that was understood, that that's where those trees would be located, because that's where the land leads up and there's a hill there. And I thought that when you weren't here at that point, I think, John, but I thought that was the clear understanding, and perhaps Chris could join in on that.
So through the chair, that's not changing. What Ed and I had talked offline about this, and what I think the confusion is that what I mentioned before is that the species of trees and their specific location is not shown on the landscaping plan. So we don't have an accurate depiction as to what that screening will look like. However, there will be 3 rows of trees or vegetation in that area. What species they are, we don't know. So what I was referring to is a condition in the previous decision that there will be review of screening on site with myself, the landscape architect for the developer, and the owners at 14 and 15 Wilson Street. What I did mention is that there is a proposed condition that requires a landscape plan to be provided to the planning board prior to the certificate of occupancy issuance, where then that's another step that if the screening proposed, or in some cases probably planted, is not sufficient, the planning board has the authority to change the screening so that it is sufficient.
In fact, on the northern screening area, there's a provision that prior to the start of installation, the wetland scientist or landscape person would meet with the landowner at 21 Wilson. And I would hope that would be honored. And I thought that it was clear that the 64 trees would be in those double and triple rows. And that had been discussed at prior meetings before you were here. And so,
yes, that's not changing.
Well, there'd be 64 trees planted in those double and triple rows. This is very important to me because I'm looking up there and it's smack in the face.
So through the chair, this is the species are named, the number of species are named, and the location of trees is shown. However, the location of the specific species of the tree is not indicated on the plan. So nothing is changing as proposed from the approved plan.
I don't want to belabor this too much, but it's important to me. There are shown 16 each of 4 species. I'm not too concerned whether species A, the hemlock is to the left or to the right of the blue spruce, but they're going to be altogether 60, because I expect there'll be reasonable decisions made by people. Will there be, the 64 trees will be in that location, whether it's one, then 4, then 2, then 3, I'm not concerned. Do I still have you?
Yep. So Mr. Cutter, I think the important part is that all the things they committed to previously still hold with regards to screening. Nothing about this amendment is impacting the screening on
I'd still like an answer that there are going to be 64 trees in the places that I'm mentioning.
John's pulling it up now.
I'm sorry.
I don't know what's going on with my computer. It's not letting me grab it. So to add to Mr. Cutter's point, this is the area. Nothing has changed. There are still these trees.
Those are trees.
Correct. The
Okay,
concern
so-
is, let me see if I can pull it up. So this is the same plan. The concern that we had that I think has been resolved is these trees are the species. These are the trees shown. There is no link shown between these two pieces. So we know that these species will be planted here, but
Okay.
how many of the American hollies will be where is unknown.
If there are 16 of each, I'm a happy pup.
Yes, so this is the planting list for the northern screening area, and this is
Okay.
the northern screening area with the location shown. We just don't know the location of each individual tree in relation to what
No,
species.
as long as they're all in that area, I'm
Yes, nothing
comfortable
is-
with it
nothing
and I
is
expect
changing
it to.
Okay.
Okay, and the plan that'll come out, that'll be reviewed by the entire board. I'm looking to be sure that I have a chance to look at it and talk about it if I'd like to.
I'm sorry, what's your?
John was mentioning that he was going to have a more finished, I think, screening plan done. I just wanted, that'll come back to the entire board, so I will have an opportunity to see it at some point.
So I think what Mr. Cutter is saying through the chair is the proposed condition I included in the packet would require, and this was out of talks with the applicant, a landscaping plan prior to the issuance of the certificate of occupancy would come back to the planning board for review of the screening to determine sufficiency and satisfaction of the screening in all the areas that are designated as screening areas. And I think Mr. Cutter is looking to get notification of the planning board's review of that plan so he can participate.
As long as it's public, that'll work for me.
Yep, and if we're going to discuss it, it will be on our agenda. And John, can I assume that as a butter he would be noticed?
So he probably wouldn't be noticed since it wouldn't be a hearing, but Mr. Cutter is very familiar with my phone number, and I'm sure he's not afraid to give me a call every so
No,
often.
and I apologize if I should be calling you Mr. Gelchik. Hope you don't mind. In that northern screening, while we're here, there's a listing of 305 other plantings. When you finish with 4 times 16 trees. Can you tell me where they're going to be? Do they follow around?
So through the chair, this whole area is the northern screening area, and it
Yep.
goes into the other sheet.
So those plantings will be going towards the other sheet.
Correct.
And those plantings, are they there for screening or are they there for, help me, why are they there other than for screening?
I would assume a mix of screening and soil stabilization.
Okay, because I know that Tom Shambo is concerned that when you look down the second prong of his driveway, the neighborhood will see this heavily concentrated array of panels. And I was wondering whether it might be a better use of some of these things, or maybe to reduce the amount and expend the resources on building in some screening at that point. I'm not trying to just take, I'm trying to see if there's a better way to do something here.
Yeah, understand, Mr. Cutter, and I guess I just want to be cautious here because I'd rather keep the conversation focused on the proposed changes from what was previously approved.
Okay, I understand.
And to be honest, so what we don't want to do is we don't want to open up this entire thing to a complete reevaluation and redesign.
I understand, and I've been working with Mr. Gelchik, and I find him reasonable. I'm sure that, you know, we can get to reasonable decisions at the end. Or the board will, not me.
Yeah. No, I understand that. We're not reviewing the entire site plan. We're reviewing the amendments that they are proposing.
Okay. My preference would have been that access road did not move up northward, just because I would have liked to have a little bit more either open space, or I hope that there might have been some vegetation that might grow where it is. But if everybody concludes that's a better place for it to be, I hear you. I think there's a fence in that, there's a gate in the fence there that was put in so there could be access, and I wonder if there's any need for that gate anymore.
So good transition. I will say that we're about up on time on this topic. We do have, as I mentioned, a very full agenda. Mr. Cutter, you had a question about the necessity for a gate, and does the applicant have a response to that specific question?
Yeah, there was a gate put in there, and I recall talking to Chris King one day, and I said, how come you're putting in a gate? And he said, if there's an emergency or to have access there, and there is now access there. So I wondered whether there was any need for a gate anymore.
Mr. King?
Sure, this is Chris with Atlantic. The gates in that area that were previously proposed were strictly so that you could get maintenance to the stormwater facility. So it wasn't for emergency access per se. It was really for maintenance of the stormwater infrastructure in that area.
Okay.
But since the fence now goes on the outside of the basin itself in that area, the gate is no longer proposed.
Okay. Thank you.
Because you'd be able to access the stormwater facility from within the array. I'm just zooming in now. There is an outlet that's just on the other side of the fence, so the gate may be limited to a man gate in that area. But you know, again, it's, you know, you still have the wall, if you will, of screening between that and then the existing buffer to remain.
Okay.
Thank you.
So here's what we're going to do. I want to just finish up the conversation about the road change. And there's probably a little bit more discussion around stormwater, so we are going to have to continue. But just want to the members of the board, are there other questions or comments related to the relocation of the access road?
I would just like to say, this is Muriel, through you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any particular concerns except for screening. This entire board is really, really dedicated to the notion of respecting the neighbors, and the road now does go up on that edge. So philosophically, I have no problem with that, but I do want to make sure that we address neighbors' concerns adequately.
Agreed. Fran?
Yeah, to that point, Gary, and I don't know if it's appropriate now or for the next meeting, but just to hear from the applicant as to why that proposed change, why they're making that change to the road. I think I understand, but I think it would be good to hear from the applicant themselves as to the change and also the mitigating factors or elements that they're going to propose to help with the screening from the real point.
Mr. Haves, do you want to
Yes,
quickly comment on that?
Yeah, quickly, just to be clear on the proposed driveway, it's within the fenced area, so it's not changing anything outside of the fenced area. It's an internal change within the array. It used to be cutting through the middle of the array, and therefore we're losing one row of modules that could fit there. So now it's going through the north, where we already have a offset between the fence and the modules and the array.
Okay.
And this is Chris with Atlantic again. I think it's also important to point out that we did look at bringing the road down around the south to locate it, as far away from the abutting properties as possible. But as everyone knows, there are multiple challenges on the site, and one of them being the existing stone wall, that in order to do that, we would need to disturb the stone wall, and that was identified as an important feature by the tribes. And so in order to free up, like Mr. Hafez said, in order to maximize the largest part of this footprint that we were left with, getting the road to either side, either the north or the south, was going to allow us to do that. And unfortunately, due to the location of that stone wall, we couldn't get it. The south would be the preferred route, but we weren't able to do that. And so that left us meandering it up along the northern edge, which, moves the panels further away from Mr. Cutter's property as well. And I know that, that was, visually, when we were making some of the final adjustments to the screening and some of the final reductions in the footprint, that was one of the points of concern, was the proximity to the panels, not the project, 221 Wilson.
Okay.
So
thank you, Chris. All right. On that note, I'm afraid we are going to have to continue because we've got to get to some other topics and looking at it. And I think that March 15th should be okay. So I am going to entertain a motion to continue this public hearing to the March 15th Planning Board meeting.
Rob Benson, so moved.
Sundar seconded.
All right, so we have a motion and a second, and I don't think we need to change or extend the decision deadline. So on that note, if there's no discussion on that continuation, we'll take a vote. Mr. Benson, how do you vote?
Rob Benson, yes.
Muriel?
Muriel Kramer, yes.
Jane?
Jane Marin, yes.
Dave?
Dave Paul, yes.
Mary?
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Deb?
Deb Feinberg, yes.
Sundar?
Sundar Subramanian, yes.
Fran?
And Dion, yes.
And Gary Trindle is a yes. Okay, on to the proposed zoning bylaw changes. And what I'd like to do is kind of break these into 3 chunks. And one of those chunks are the specific solar changes, which would be the language changes as well as the overlay district. The second chunk would be items C through H, which would be the car washes, housekeeping, non-conforming lots, wireless telecom, accessory dwelling units, and signage. And then the fourth one would be the tree clearing bylaw. Sorry, the third one would be the tree clearing bylaw. And I just want to be cognizant of time because we also have the International Marathon Museum folks that will be on in about 45 minutes. But I'm thinking I know we have a lot of people from the public on the solar front, so let's go ahead and start with with Article 31, the solar photovoltaic installation language changes. And Mary, do you want to walk us through the proposed changes to that bylaw?
Certainly. So, as you know, this has been a long, long road. And unfortunately, I'm really, really close to the issue. So sometimes I might skip over the important details because I'm too close to it. So feel free to correct me or point out some things that I may miss. So the purpose of this, the bylaw changes regarding commercial solar ground-mounted installations is to protect neighborhoods, protect abutters, and view from roads, and also protect the ability of all people to use their land in an appropriate way, to invest in their land, and also not to have it impinged upon by abutting uses. So because of town council recommendations and advice that we got along the way, we have limited these changes to this this particular bylaw to those that we can justify as being a health, welfare, or safety benefit to the public. There were certain changes to the bylaw that we proposed that town council did recommend that we would not be able to justify having it only restricted on solar. So that is why, certain things got taken off of our plate here, and we were restricted to some significant changes to screening and particularly a glare analysis, sound analysis, and things like that. So we've had to focus primarily on beefing up those areas and giving planning board, in the way that the language is written, giving planning board some additional tools to assess the impact on neighbors and being able to mitigate the impact on abutters. So do you want me to go through any more details of this?
Yeah, and maybe if I could just sort of put some different language on what you just said, but I think that probably most of the people on this call have been following along in some capacity in this process. Really important to note that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts doesn't allow us to do anything that would be exclusionary of commercial solar installations in any zone, regardless of whether it's residential or commercial or industrial or anything else. So I just want to take a moment and commend our zoning advisory committee, because I think they have literally looked under every stone there is to help us, to give us additional tools to make sure that commercial solar is installed in a way that, again, to this language, that minimizes impact, that promotes public health and welfare, and undue disturbance of neighboring landowners and whatnot. So I just throw that out there because it's complicated. With between Zach and planning board, we've been through dozens of meetings to flush this out. Town council has been involved at length, and this is where things currently stand. So Mary, I'm wondering, do you want to hit on sort of the highlights or the changes, going back to your point about glare and slope and whatnot, and how these proposals would address, I think in particular, some of those deficiencies that are highlighted in the solar installation over between Lumber and Alexander?
Certainly. So to reiterate a point, in the applicability, we tried to clarify that this has nothing to do with roof-mounted solar. Roof-mounted solar is covered under accessory uses, as is any residential use, for if you have a few panels in your backyard. So that type of thing is not covered here. So the major things that we made changes to is that, and it is administrative, so it may not be as clear to the public how important this is, but we added site plan review for commercial solar. Site plan review was not something that previously was part of commercial solar. So it is a major project under site plan review. That means that that a lot of things that planning board normally does, they for other developments, they now can do for commercial solar, and it is important. John can obviously go through all the things that are different, but that it was a special permit only before, and now it does have to go through site plan review.
That would be item B.
Yep, that's B.
Yep.
Okay. So again, we clarified all setback, buffer requirements, screening requirements are applicable for the zoning district, are applicable, of course, for solar, but also that the planning board may impose greater setback requirements. So that, again, it's strengthening the language more than anything, because planning board has a difficult time imposing greater restrictions than what is written into a bylaw. So this previously did not really give planning board much leeway to increase setback requirements. And that was our intention, is to increase that ability. That's C. Okay. Security fences, and then fences surrounding the installations shall be set back from the property line a distance that the planning board determines necessary to minimize visual impact. So again, it was previously that the fences would be right on the property line or right within the setback area, but again, gives planning board some leeway on that. It's a minor point, but we did think that it was important. Could I? Yeah, thank you. Okay. Okay, so I would say that in F2, that's probably the strongest language that we added. Solar panels, supporting structures, and appurtenances shall be shielded from view year-round in all districts. So, and a lot of what has changed in the language throughout this bylaw gives planning board additional tools to determine the view from any, from all structures. I believe we talked about having it from second floors and from roadways within a certain distance. But basically that the applicant needs to provide sightline, what is the sightline representations from an engineer, and this is down in G2. That's what the assessment is. Yep, right there. So that type of thing is extremely important. We don't normally get that, and it's hard to see on a plan. I'm putting trees here. Oh, well, that seems like a good idea, but with the sightline representations, we actually can get an idea. Does this block the view? Is this the size tree that's necessary? How many more, trees or fencing or whatever berms are necessary to actually shield the view from the neighbors? So, okay. There's a glare analysis that we put in here that all applicants need to provide. This was, just for an example, that a recent applicant, we asked about glare, and they said, that, well, glare has never been a problem. And so actually showing an analysis that they have to provide, that is written and that is, visual and so on, makes a big difference in terms of planning board's ability to assess it and provide a mitigation. Noise analysis is another point. I'm not going to go into all the details of it, but it's not the noise from the solar panels themselves. It is the noise that buffering, that the removal of trees will cause greater noise to be transmitted across the site. So we're establishing a measurement and an engineering. I'm trying to think of the right word. So a noise analysis and not just measurement, but then the anticipation of the new measurement after tree clearing takes place and so on. And that's an important point, I think, as well. Next page. So we did talk about site plan, landscape plan, sedimentation plan, all needs to be clearly designated. That's all.
timing.
That's not particularly new. I think that gives the basics. Obviously there's a lot more detail in here, but everyone has had the opportunity to read through it, and I don't think it makes a lot of sense to talk more about that unless you have specific things that you wanted to point out beyond this, Gary.
Mary, just one more point. Given the last discussion about pollinator mixes, this also adds a bylaw that specifically requires that pollinator mix.
It does.
So strengthening that as well.
It does. And it talks about this has to be year round, and it has to be maintained for the lifetime of the project. And we didn't have that language before either.
And if I could, through you, Mr. Chair, it prohibits the use of fertilizers and
chemicals. Yeah.
Chemicals.
Okay, Mary, thank you for, again, a pretty comprehensive review. A lot of changes in this. Let's go ahead and open it up to the board. And again, I think this is the changes are substantial enough. I guess actually, let's do this. Let's start with general comments. And if we need to, we can go into detail per section. But let's start in a general sense and see if there are areas of concern or areas of focus that we want to dig further into.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I have had a chance to review this and seen some of it real time in action. Mary, I just want to say thank you to you and your team. I'm really pleased with this and how it came out and the level of detail and control that the planning board should have going forward. I think it's really responsive to the circumstance we've been struggling with.
So through you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Dave.
So this is similar to what you said in light of the previous discussion comment, and we don't need to spend much time on it now. It's just a quick comment, but perhaps in maybe the next go round of this, we can get in some minimal spacing of panels. Just have a provision in there, so whatever is decided for the appropriate distance between to allow the growth of plantings. Just a heads up for the Zach team and our team.
Right.
Yeah, I guess on that specific note, and John, if you can forward down to that section H, the pollinator mix. And Dave, I'm hoping that we don't have to review this bylaw every single year with a lot more changes, as I'm sure Mary can attest to, and the other folks that are on Zach.
Yeah, just through you, Mr. Chair, I didn't want to say, can you squeeze it in now? I just wanted to give the opportunity for it in the future.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to look and see if there was a simple way to update item H here so that because I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's not so much that we're concerned about the density of the solar panels, it's that we want to make sure that we don't destroy the ground underneath them, and that we can actually, that if we are requiring a pollinator mix, that it actually grows. And John is kindly highlighting the second part of that. Alternative vegetation or cover options may be proposed by the applicant in consideration of soil type and quality, subject to approval by the planning board.
Through the chair.
Yes, go ahead.
So there is one line there which probably already addresses this. The second line, shall be seeded with pollinator seed mix and maintained as bird and insect habitat. So in my opinion, that sort of covers, it cannot be a bird and insect habitat, just plain soil. It feels to me that that already gives us some room for vegetation being available there.
The only thing I would propose there is maybe one minor change, and that instead of insect habitat, we say pollinator habitat. I'm just thinking that if I were to interpret this literally, insects could be a lot of different things. Could be
Ticks.
Yeah, exactly. Any objection to changing insect to pollinator there?
Nope.
John?
I think they go hand in hand.
Yep.
Yeah, I would caution the planning board to not get too specific with this, because it could come out in the future that while pollinators are great, there's also this other insect that's just
You
as
need
beneficial, and
insects.
excluding that would be a problem.
Okay, that's fair. All right, Fran, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, so one thing so 2 points, Mr. Chair. On H, I'm not crazy about fiddling around too much. The technology may continue to evolve as well. Maybe there's translucent panels at some point. I don't know, right? Where it just becomes easier for a mix to germinate and seed, regardless. And I understand the concern about getting so tight between the panels. I think the other issue there becomes one of runoff, but that's a separate thing. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole now. The other question, let me kind of step back. Mary, great job by you and the other members of ZAC. This is very comprehensive and thorough, and I think this is going to be really a foundational, assuming that it doesn't get passed or some derivative of it gets passed at town meeting, that's going to be a great tool for the planning board, working with future potential developers on solar. My one comment is on G2, where, and hopefully, Mr. Chair, this doesn't get too specific, but it's one of the few places I actually saw a number where there was a 500-foot distance between the property and the proposed development. Was that 500 feet number, was that from Beta? Was that a state number? Was that a number that Zach came up with? Just trying to get some clarity.
It's any portion of a public way within 500 feet of the property. I think that's the one you're referring to.
That is, right? So the 500 feet.
Okay, so it doesn't directly talk about abutters, but public ways nonetheless. John, I don't recall exactly where that came from. Do you?
So I think it was, we were talking about 300 feet, using 300 feet since that's the standard buffer for abutters. And then it was discussed to round up to 500.
That makes sense. Yeah, that seems to ring a bell. And again, that was because of some visuals that we'd had in terms of distance to solar panels and that representing only 200 feet or 500 feet or so on, and still being very visible. So.
I'm totally comfortable with that, and I think that's probably the right number, just having gone with past history. I was just more interested in where that number originated from. So thank you, both of you.
All right, other questions or comments from the board? Jane.
Okay, so I've read some studies about the noise buffering, and it seems as though it's more perceived perception that fencing or those other trees or whatever can actually quiet the noise. but in actuality, the studies show that it doesn't really bear fruit. So I would like to see some more research on that. And also seems like this is a overburden on people who actually own their own property, who want to develop it for whatever reason. I would just hate to see us go down that path. That's going to be so contested, especially where lawsuits have been brought up and in previous conversations. And I think we just need to do some more research on that. And I would also like to compliment Mary and the ZAC. They really have worked really, really hard to come up with a really common sense language on this bylaw. And I tried to go in on all of the meetings and listen to them. And I really want to compliment them on all of their hard work.
And Jane, just one comment on the noise, and I think that's exactly why the requirement here is to have an acoustic engineer actually do an analysis, because I think to your point, it is hard to judge, and there might be some perception versus reality, but the surest way to address that is to have a professional come in and do that analysis.
So I guess my question is, whose burden would that be? Would that be on the town or the developer, or?
It would be on the developer.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way that all of our other standards, I mean, it would be part of Beta's review as a major site plan, but the developer would do that first.
So the measurement was key, as Gary pointed out, is that it needs to be measured before any clearing takes place and needs to be measured afterwards and analysis done during the application process. So we're dealing with real data instead of just perception.
Correct. So I guess my question goes back to cost analysis and what are we trying to accomplish by this? And, we are all property owners in our own rights. And, we haven't got to the restrictions yet, but how is this all going to play out at the end of the day? And who's going to pay the dollar figure?
Yeah, Jane, I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure that ground-mounted commercial solar photovoltaic is installed in places, locations in a way that it does not have a negative or detrimental impact on the community. And if we go back to the very first sentence there, I think this is all intended to address those risks. Muriel?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I fully support this provision, but I think that I agree with Jane and maybe don't come to the same conclusion. I do think that mitigation after the fact is never as successful as doing the right job first. I think the assessment during the site plan review is really important. But the little that I know about mitigation also suggests that the impact is for man-made mitigation is not like a stand of trees. So I really fully support this section, but I think I want to also make sure we stay open to the fact that it it may not be the whole thing that we need to do in the future. And doing it right the first time before you take the trees down or all the trees down is probably the very best first step.
All right, let's go ahead and open it up to the public for comments here. So if you are a member of the public, you can raise your hand in Zoom. I would encourage, again, we're going to require that comments be 3 minutes or less, and depending on what we get for comments, if someone else has said it previously, there's no need to repeat the same themes. But any comments from the public on these proposed bylaw changes?
Yes, I have one. This is Nancy Corbin. I am an abutter on the very north side of this project. And I'm wondering if
Ms.
your
Ms. Corbin, can you just state your address for us?
13 Bull Moose Run.
Thank you.
Sure.
I'm sorry, we're not talking about a specific project here, so I'm just wondering what, yeah, okay.
Yeah, my question to the board has to do with the ongoing project with Route 90 and 495. Have we done an overlay of how the solar project overlaps with that project? It relates to noise, conservation issues, tree removal, any of that.
So I don't think what we're talking about here has any direct correlation to the 495 Mass Pike interchange. We're just talking about changes to the existing commercial solar bylaw change. Sorry, I just got a note that
If I might, Mr. Chair, I think that the question might apply to the overlay map that does delineate the 495 corridor.
Yep.
That may be where the question should be.
That might be, but we're not talking about that one yet. But good question for the next proposal, for the next proposal. Any other questions or comments?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Jeff Doherty, 3 Angels Way. On that stipulation of G with the 500 feet, so they originally talked about having it as 300 feet, and then it got increased to 500 feet. And is this just for land clearing for a solar site, or are you going to apply that same standard to a developer that wants to put in a development?
So this is only specifically for commercial solar installations. And I just want to mention too that 500 feet is specifically the sightline representation. So basically what that means is that they're going to have to include depictions that show what it's going to look like from the public way if it's within 500 feet of the property. But this is only solar we're talking about right now.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it seems restrictive to me for a property owner that wanted to do solar, but somebody else in town that wants to make a development, that same standard doesn't apply. My other comment is I'm not sure what number it is on there, but in their preliminary talks about a week ago, they talked about 40% of a site would be the limitation for a solar array, and they beat that up so that now it's saying 20%. And I'm trying to remember
through the chair, that was for the tree clearing bylaw.
If I can just step in really quickly, that's a different bylaw. That's the tree clearing bylaw. We haven't gotten to that yet. There's a couple of different bylaws that we're working through here. This one is just the modifications to the solar bylaw, and that discussion doesn't have any impact on these proposed changes.
Oh, okay, I apologize.
But I think it's a perfectly appropriate question when we get to that. I'm honestly not sure if that'll be tonight because but you know, it's a worthwhile question.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Are we ready to vote on this one?
Well, this is Tom Shambo. I had my hand up, but I guess you guys can't see me.
I'm sorry, Tom. It didn't populate, but go ahead, Tom. If you could just state your name and address.
Raise my physical hand or raise the Zoom hand, but my apologies. My name is Tom Shambo, 15 Wilson Street. I'm just curious. I mean, I like many of the things in this particular document, but I'm curious, when does it apply to a solar installation? Is it just for brand new applications? Is it for applications that have started but haven't completed? Can that be addressed? And maybe you covered it and I missed it, so thank you.
Nope, that's a great question. And I'm going to rely on John to correct me here, but this would apply to any ground-mounted commercial solar application that was initiated after the posting date of this hearing process. John's not unmuting himself. So does that answer your question, Mr. Shambo?
Yes, thank you.
It's a little messy. It's not from when it's accepted, it's from when the hearing process starts.
Yeah, a new application from when the hearing process started. Okay, thank you.
Yes. And I'll just pause there. Any other questions or comments from folks? Any other questions or comments from the board?
Hello?
Okay. Oh, yes, I see a call-in user. If you can identify your name and address and then state your comments.
Yes, I'm on both video and phone. This is Tom Robertson at 15 Fawn Ridge Road.
Go ahead, Tom.
Just curious what you to what you just said. When did the hearing process start?
John,
and
when was this first posted?
So, so it's a little different than how Gary said, but I think the applicability is the same. So when a zoning article is advertised for a public hearing, which started 2 weeks ago, right? Because we need to advertise 2 weeks in advance of the hearing. If there is an application that has not received all of their permits by that date, they are subject to the new zoning bylaw should it be approved at town meeting. So at this point, there are no new applications that we have. The Wilson Street Solar is an amendment to an existing application. So that is technically grandfathered in to the previous bylaw. We don't have any new applications in front of us. So any application at this point would be subject to this bylaw if it's approved at town meeting. If it's voted down at town meeting, then it's subject to the current existing bylaw.
And something like the Wilson Street amendment or change that was just discussed, if the board chose to revisit that as that amendment versus just saying that it was minor, would the Wilson Street application be subject to this?
So it would have to be a substantially large change, and to the point where they'd almost have to file a new special permit application. If they're amending the existing special permit, that would not apply. But if they are, and this, I don't know if it's happened in front of the board in the recent past, but if somebody gets a special permit approved for anything, and then, it was something relatively small, and then they come in and basically change the entire project to be different, but they're saying it's an amendment, the board can require them to file a new special permit application because it's a significant change and substantial in nature. I don't believe the Wilson Street changes would rise to that level, but if they were to say we want to double the amount of solar and clear all new land and put in a new access road, then that might rise to that level. But I don't believe at this point it would rise to that level.
Well, they are saying that they're going to be reducing the amount of ability to grow soil. I don't know what the correct term is, stabilizing stuff under there. And so I
So if the
think
board
that
determines that to be substantial enough to require a new special permit application, then that's the board's decision.
Right. And so then this would apply. This would apply to that property at that point.
At that point, yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other further questions or comments? And I know I'm giving this one a little bit more time, but I know this is a big one.
This is Beth Cameron. I have a question.
Yes, can you just give us your address, please?
Yes, 70 Teresa Road. In portion G, number 2, when they're talking about the 500 foot capacity and doing a site representation. If that were to move forward, would they then be required to make sure they live up to that representation?
So,
meaning, say a rendering shows everything would be screened sufficiently, but in reality, would they be held to that standard?
essentially, yes, because the sightline representation is the tool that the planning board will be able to use to assess whether the mitigation is sufficient. So they need to be putting screening in that is consistent with what they show the planning board they will do. And that screening needs to be sufficient and will be checked. And we, you know, my understanding of the way that we worded this is that the planning board does have the opportunity to go back and revisit it because it needs to be maintained lifetime of the project, and the screening needs to be adequate year round. So, so from that perspective, the sightline representations that they provide to the planning board about the mitigation that they're putting in place needs to be maintained and needs to be adequate.
Yeah, and I think just to strike that a little bit too, it's going to be important that we capture that in our conditions as we review projects, because that's, you know, as soon as it becomes a condition, then it increases the enforceability of that prior to issuing permits for the installation.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so I guess on that note, I will entertain a motion to recommend modifications to Article 31 solar photovoltaic installations as written and discussed.
So moved. Muriel.
Rob Benson, second.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, just a point of order. Are we recommending that this goes on the warrant? What are we recommending?
We are recommending this specific language for the warrant.
I think so.
No, sorry, John's saying no. John.
So this is already on the warrant. So basically it would be recommending approval at town meeting.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to rephrase that. I will entertain a motion to recommend approval of these bylaw changes for Article 31 solar photovoltaic installations for town meeting 2021.
So moved.
So moved.
Rob Benson, second.
We've got Deb with the motion, Rob with the second. Any further discussion? Thank you, John, for that clarification. And in light of no discussion, we'll vote. Rob?
Rob Benson, yes.
Muriel?
Muriel Kramer, yes.
Jane?
Jane Marin, no.
Dave?
Dave Fall, yes.
Mary?
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Deb?
Yeah, Feinberg, yes.
Sundar?
Sundar Sivaraman, yes.
Fran?
Fran Dion, yes.
And Gary Trendle is a yes. The motion carries 8-1. So again, Mary and Zach, great job with this. To me, this is something that I think we can carry forward with a lot of momentum behind it at the town meeting. And I know this was a tough one, but I'm really grateful to your leadership and all of the work that you and Zach have put into it. So, all right. So we've got about 12 minutes until we are slated to talk about the International Marathon Museum. I'm thinking, just to be a little bit efficient with time here, the zoning articles C through H, which include Article 6A, car washes in downtown business district, Article 8A, housekeeping and formatting, changes, non-conforming article, let's see, that's 19, non-conforming lots, uses, and structures. Article 16, wireless telecom. Article 18, those are all proposed changes that were previously recommended for town meeting, with no changes to them. And what I'd like to do, if we can, given that there's no changes to what was previously recommended, or what was previously recommended for approval at town meeting, I'd like to just treat those as a group, and potentially vote them as a group. And so what I'd like to do right now is take a moment and see if any members of the planning board have any specific comments or questions on those articles. And if you're in the meeting packet themselves, that would be 4.3 through 4.8.
Can I make a motion that we recommend them as written, and then we can do a discussion?
I'm sorry, what was that, Dave?
To make a motion to recommend them as written, and then we can have the discussion.
Sure, you can make that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so Dave with the motion, Muriel with the second, and discussion. Are there any comments from the public on these? I know we're not getting into detail here, but we've talked about all of them at length over the past year and a half.
Gary, could, through the chair, could you just repeat those just for clarification?
Sure. So the first is Article 6A, car washes in downtown business district, and this would be to remove car washes as a use allowable by special permit in the downtown business district. The second is some housekeeping items that is to correct the numbering within the sections in order to match the formatting elsewhere in the zoning bylaws of Article 8A. Article 19, non-conforming lots, uses, and structures. That is to allow the zoning enforcement officer to provide a waiver from requiring a special permit in situations for non-conforming lots, uses, and structures. This is specifically, for example, if someone wanted to put a dormer on their house or would like to enclose an existing deck. The wireless telecommunications changes are to address changes that have taken place at the federal level in order to bring the town zoning bylaws on the subject into conformance. Article 18, accessory dwelling units. This proposed change to the zoning bylaws to allow for more situations where accessory dwelling units would be allowed. Currently, the regulations prohibit anyone that is not related to the homeowner through blood, marriage, or adoption from inhabiting the ADU. The proposed change is to address changing relationship dynamics in society and allow for persons with a personal relationship to the homeowner to reside in the ADU, such as a child's unmarried significant other or a close family friend that is not related by blood, marriage, or adoption. It also removes the criteria that an ADU resident be over the 60 years of age. And then signs. This proposed amendment is to address concerns with business owners, difficulties during periods of road construction in proximity to their business. This is effectively allowing some additional temporary signage, in particular for the Main Street Corridor project to help out those businesses during the construction period.
Thank you.
All right, if there's no further discussion, we will vote on that motion. And I just want to check really quickly here just to make sure there's no hands raised and don't see anyone from the public. So we'll go ahead and vote. Rob, how do you vote?
Rob Benson, yes.
Muriel?
Muriel Kramer, yes.
Jane?
Jane Moran, yes.
Dave?
Dave Paul, yes.
Mary?
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Deb?
Deb Feinberg, yes.
Sundar?
Sundar Suvaraman, yes.
Fran?
Fran DeYoung, yes.
And Gary Trendle is a yes. So that motion carries. All right. So
suggestion for the chair?
Yes, Dave?
You want to knock up the minutes or?
Well, I was just going to say, if the applicant for the International Marathon Museum is here, let's go ahead and get to that one. And I will say, just for so that people know, here's what I'm thinking for tonight. we'll commit to the 30 minutes that we've allotted for the special permit for the International Marathon Center. What I'm thinking, if people are open to it, is that we also go ahead after the conclusion of that, we talk about the solar overlay, the tree clearing bylaws we hold for the next meeting. Does that seem reasonable to folks? I know we're going to go a little past 10 that way, but I'd prefer to keep talking about the solar stuff if we can.
Sounds fine.
Okay.
Do it.
All right. Do we have the applicant for the International Marathon Center here? I see Regan or Reagan?
Regan.
Regan. Okay.
Yes.
So Regan, if you want to give us a quick introduction, and I think I'm going to speak for all of us, but I think we're all familiar with what the International Marathon Center is. But if you can just quickly update us as to why you're here in front of the board.
Through the chair,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
am going to recuse myself because I am in a butter, but I would like to jump in at a public comment
Great.
as the chair of the Upper Charles later on.
Thank you, Jane. Appreciate you grabbing our attention for that.
Thank you.
All right, Regan, the mic is yours.
All right, great. Try and make a brief, and hopefully it will be the simple tap tonight. So again, thank you for having us here. My name is Regan and I'm here on behalf of the 26.2 Foundation, and we are here seeking a special permit for use to allow a cultural use of a museum on the property located at 53 East Main Street, as allowed by and defined in the Town of Hopkinton zoning bylaws. The foundation has already attended a pre-submission hearing back in January with town staff, where we reviewed any questions or comments they had and talked about the application. So specifically, the foundation is proposing to construct, maintain, and operate a museum on this property, which is currently owned by the town. As again, most of you know, this land was conveyed to the town as part of the host community agreement relative to the Legacy Farms master plan special permit in 2010. And the land was intended to be developed for active and passive recreational use for the community. The property has long been discussed as a potential site for the IMC, International Marathon Center. So much so that in 2019, the town did issue an RFP seeking proposals for respondents to construct, maintain, and operate a International Marathon Center on this land via a ground lease. And then subsequently, the town issued a second RFP later in 2020 for the remaining portion of the land to construct, operate, and maintain facilities auxiliary to and complementary to an International Marathon Center. The foundation had responded to both RFPs. And following that, the Hopkinton Select Board did unanimously vote to choose the 26.2 Foundation as the selected respondent to both RFPs. So now we're here. They've been selected, and the intention is that the property will be constructed as a museum as a primary use, which does fall under, the museum falls under the definition of a cultural use, which is allowed by special permit in the residential subdistrict. The project will include a 25,000 square foot museum building, as well as, the typical things that would go along with that, exhibit space, meeting space, cafe, gift shop, parking, as well as outdoor recreational space, both passive and active.
I think Hildoff has some static, some feedback coming. Can we just try
from me?
Yeah, I think it's coming from you, Regan. I'm not sure there's much you can do about it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. All right, maybe I talk slower. Will that help?
No, it's not you.
Oh, it's not me. Okay. So maybe anyone else who isn't speaking can mute. That might help.
I don't see it coming from anyone else, Dave.
Let's see, it sounds quiet now, so
It was coming from Tim.
yes.
Tim, figures.
All right, so Regan, why are you in front of us tonight? I think, like I said, we what do you?
We're here because the use of a museum, which is a cultural use, requires a special permit in this residential subdistrict on this property. So obviously the detailed plans, all the engineering and advanced plans, once we would get to that point, would be reviewed under a major site plan review application process. But for now, we're just trying to get the actual use approved via special permit. What else can I talk to you guys
I think
about?
that's probably sufficient for now.
Oh, okay, great.
We might have some additional questions, but I think that's a great overview, and thank you for that.
Yep.
So at this point, what we'll do is we'll turn to John for staff comments.
Okay, so I think this is a unique situation for the board. It's a special permit, but it's not under the same type of process that a normal special permit would go under. And I'm going to put something up on the screen that shows the proposed design, which was included in the application, but I want to caution the board, we are not discussing the site plan. We are only discussing the use and whether it conforms to the special permit criteria within the Osmond district. So let me go through that decision criteria. And what we are looking to determine is if the proposed use is in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the zoning chapter, and if the use special permit is consistent with and subject to all provisions of the master plan special permit applicable to the Osmond district as a whole. So the other thing that I want to mention is, while this area, the Osmond district, has a master plan special permit, the applicant can choose one of two options, whether to amend the master plan special permit to include this, or to apply for a new special permit for a use for the particular property. I think it would probably be a little onerous to amend the master plan special permit for this, so that's why they probably chose the use special permit. But all in all, it's a relatively straightforward process determining whether this use conforms, not necessarily the site characteristics. They do have to come for site plan review, but whether the use conforms to the criteria. And we received comments from the Board of Health and the DPW, and both of those sets of comments really kind of focused on the site plan. So I don't think they need to be addressed at this point.
So John, question for you. What, from your perspective, what are the primary points of consideration that we should be thinking about? I know the decision criteria is, the proposed use is in harmony with the general purpose and intent of this chapter, but is there anything that stands out to you in particular that we should be discussing or evaluating with regards to that?
I think, in my opinion, the main kind of crux of this issue is, since it's in the residential subdistrict, if it is in harmony with any other type of residential uses within the Osmond district. I don't necessarily see this as being something that would be harmful to those types of uses, but that's up to the board to decide.
Okay, so basically the crux of the issue is, does a cultural center such as International Marathon Center fit in per that definition of that this site could be used for cultural purposes?
Yeah, I believe that would be
that very well, but
the main focus.
Can I just ask a clarifying question?
Sure, Mary.
Sure. I thought this was addressed under the master plan special permit at town meeting to include this as a use for this, a potential use for this property.
It may have been as a potential use, but I think now that this is a official filing, it's more of a stated intent rather than a possibility.
Mary, I would tend to agree with you that because language is adopted and specifically Marathon was identified as or a museum was identified in that language, this seems relatively straightforward to me. All right, John, any other staff comments? And to your point, the DPW and health department comments are really more related to the site plan review.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Oh, I was just asking if there are any other staff comments or staff reports. Okay. So we can, I think, quickly get into detailed discussion of the decision criteria. And again, John just read those aloud. Are there any questions or comments from the board with regards to this application and those defined decision criteria?
Through the chair.
Mary, go ahead.
So I thought the zoning enforcement officer letter stated it very eloquently, was that the primary use here is museum. The accessory uses are reasonable accessory uses for a museum, and that this falls within the already approved cultural definition that, thank you. So I would agree completely with the opinion stated in this letter by the zoning enforcement officer.
Thanks, Mary. Any other comments or questions with regards to how this conforms with to the decision criteria?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just for clarity, are we talking about Article 26, Osmond uses?
That's funny, as I look at my zoning bylaws book here, Article, yes, we are.
Okay, I was just wondering which specific line item of the uses we were talking about, because there's cultural uses, there's education uses.
Yes. So, and I will say, if you have a printed out version of it, like I do, I don't think that's been updated since the town meeting where the definition of cultural use was specifically expanded to include museum. And John, I'm looking to you. Can you just confirm which part of Article 26 we're talking about here?
So I don't quite understand the question, but this is the Osmond use table. Cultural uses is a special permit within the residential subdistrict. And cultural uses include a museum. Does that answer your question?
I think so. Dave, does that answer your question?
So, sorry, John, can you go back to that table? So this would be the middle column, commercial subdistrict, or?
Nope, residential subdistrict.
Okay.
Right here.
Yep, okay, so it looks like I do have an older version, which was no for cultural, but now it's a special permit. Okay, so we're just speaking to that line right there. Great, thank you.
Okay.
Through the chair, I mean, it looks like it, I mean, absolutely adheres to both of the decision criteria, and I'm excited for this project to move forward.
Okay. All right, I just want to keep going here. Comments from the public, and I know that Jane Moran had a comment that she wanted to make as a member of the public. Jane, you there?
So
I am. Okay, so as a direct abutter, I just want to congratulate 26.2 on their endeavors. I think I'm really excited about all of these future endeavors coming forward. I'm coming from a resident, 70 East Main Street in Hopkinton, and also chair of the Upper Charles Trail Committee. And multiple times we've gone before in public meetings before the select board speaking to this. And we've talked about trails going through this property, which is really important to the Upper Charles Trail. In some of the pamphlets that have gone out, that 26.2 has put out, the foundation, they speak to just trails. I'm a little bit more concerned about the multi-trail. I would like to have them look at multi-trail use, because that's what the Upper Charles Trail would be looking for, is a wider path, not just a dirt path. And I understand also that this would probably come up in a site plan review. So this is probably premature. So I guess my comment to the board would be to ask the board to think about conditioning a multi-trail purpose as a condition going forward for the site plan review.
Thanks, Jan. I think that's a great question. I'm just going to look to the applicant first. Do you have any reaction to that request?
Mr. Chairman,
Sure, Mr. Kilduff. Go ahead. You want to identify yourself and your address?
Yeah. Tim Kilduff, 3 Woodview Way. Very, very early on, when we looked at the property, we saw substantial benefit to the community. One is connection of trails, the trail system. We're not trail experts, but would be absolutely open to working with the appropriate committees in the community to explain that expanding the trail system is high on our list of priorities. This property could enhance what Jane is talking about, and happy to look at it.
Great. Thank you.
Tim. Just one more follow-up question.
Sure, go ahead, Jane.
In the pamphlets that 26.2 Foundation has shared is a very large parking space. We would be looking for an opportunity to share part of that in times when they're not using it, and maybe the town could use it for trail systems or something else. And I'm wondering if that might be possible, and to further discuss it during the site plan review.
Yeah, I think that's a great example of probably what fits in the site plan review. I'm supportive of including a condition for the trail, because I think that's the most important part, but from a parking perspective, that's probably more appropriate for the site plan.
Thank you.
Mr. McDowell.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Roy McDowell, Legacy Farms. As many of you know, we've worked with the planning board and the community as a whole for the last 12, 13 years, believe it or not. Worked with the planning board on all the zoning, and we very much encourage and support the Marathon Museum being at this site. As you know, we're in a butter in the rear, and we think this would be a wonderful addition to Hopkinton.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McDowell. Are there any other comments? Muriel.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. First, congratulations to Mr. Kilduff. I know that this has been a long time coming, and I think it's pretty exciting for the town and for the 26.2 Foundation. The only question I have is really super technical, and I am not in opposition in any way. I'm fully in support. But the permitting process is written for the owner or the owner's representative. Do we need to make some sort of finding that we're speaking to the applicant or lessee for the property when we do our decision?
It's a good question.
I know that they've been before. I mean, I think that we could make a finding that they have the support of the select board, but I just didn't know if we should be.
Isn't this comparable to, I mean, I just think of, for example, some of the commercial solar applications that we've had where we've had an applicant who is not actually the landowner coming forward with that special permit application. I think it's similar, but I'll defer to our expert principal planner.
So the application form that they've submitted has the town signature as the owner of the property. So that's generally accepted as the support of the property owner in the application. If that's satisfactory to the board.
Yeah, that's great.
All right. So we don't have any waivers requested. think the decision criteria we have reviewed. The proposed findings would be that the proposed cultural use International Marathon Center is in harmony with the general purpose and intent of this chapter. The use special permit will be consistent with and is subject to all provisions of the master plan special permit applicable to the Osmond district as a whole, and that the proposed use will not be detrimental to the neighborhood or the town. People comfortable with that? See nodding heads, okay. And then with regards to conditions, so we have just one proposed condition. I think this relates back to Ms. Moran's points, that the applicant shall include provisions for a hard surface multi-use trail in coordination with the Upper Charles Trails Committee as part of any future application for site plan approval. Are there any other conditions? Yes, Fran.
Question on the condition. What is defined as hard surface, Mr. Chairman?
I'm assuming, and Jane, correct me if I'm wrong, well, I think I can ask for Jane's input, but I'm assuming that that is similar to the Upper Charles Trail or the Center Trail, which is a hard pack gravel. And I think the idea is that enables bicycles, wheelchairs, runners, walkers, all sorts of different uses of that trail.
So I can clarify that often the state doesn't approve of stone dust over a 1% grade. So it's really going to be dependent upon the engineers and how they curve the trails. And we're not even near that process yet. And it will really be dependent on how VHB does our our engineering studies on that, because in order for the state to pay for this project, which is our #1 goal, it has to meet their requirements.
So Jane, just to clarify, does hard surface, does that imply an asphalt of some type, or is
it could
stone
be
dust and gravel?
Correct. It could be a porous asphalt, which Roy McDowell can testify to, because he's got that all throughout his project, both on the north and the south legacy farms, which meets all of the qualifications of COMCOM and other environmental aspects of priority. The problem with stone dust is when you run into grades, and that does get into a steep grade after the first 2,000 feet, it starts to gradually increase in grade. Stone dust runs off, and there's a substantial risk for conservation erosion and things like that. So we're going to have to pass conservation and the DEP and other things. So it's yet to be determined.
Probably don't need to get into a debate about this. I would say that portions of the Center Trail are steeper than a 1% grade right now.
Center Trail? I don't think so.
Correct. What's that?
That's less than one. That's about 1%.
Not between by Field 13 to Chamberlain Street. It's not.
That's a different aspect. That's not part of. That's the Center Park Trail aspect too.
Okay.
The first part from Loop Road to Main Street is pretty much level.
Yeah. So I don't know if Fran, go ahead.
I'm not crazy. This condition was put in by who, Mr. Chair?
Well, it hasn't been put in by anybody yet. That's for us to discuss, and we have the option to reword this as we see appropriate.
And then Jane talked about something that in order for the state to pay, so if I'm putting it together, we're asking the applicant to have a hard surface multi-use trail so that then the Upper Charles Trail Committee can get the state to pay for a trail network?
No, what we would be
I understand that.
What we would be asking the 26.2 is to give the town an option for, 20-foot easement so that we can go in there and do the engineering studies. And the engineering studies would then determine how we can conform this to come up with a trail that ultimately could be paid for by the state.
So I'm going to propose something here. And that would be to strike the words hard surface from this proposed condition. It doesn't mean that it might not end up being a hard surface, but
I would agree with that.
I think that gives us a few more options.
And I would agree. And I think that it's premature at this stage to determine whether it's going to be, what kind of surface it's going to be. And you can't rule out a porous, hard surface asphalt. But we do know that stone dust doesn't hold up with grades. So we just don't know. And it's just premature.
Understood. So Mr. McDowell?
Mr. Chairman?
If the discussion is about an easement, not the actual construction of the sidewalk, because the state's going to pay for it, shouldn't it just be language that the foundation would agree to an appropriate easement to be designed and recorded at the time of site plan review and not discuss surface at all?
Thank you. That's good.
Because you're really talking about an easement.
Correct.
Once you have the easement's in the appropriate place that you want it, at that point, you'll have VHB design something, go to the state and say, this is our requirements. And the state's either going to pay for it or they're not. But it's not really incumbent upon the foundation to pay for the sidewalk, just give the easement for the sidewalk.
So I guess what I don't want to get into here is predetermining how this is going to be paid for. I go back to the intent. The intent is to make sure that through the site plan review, that the applicant worked with the Upper Trails Committee to provide to design the appropriate linkages. And so I worry a little bit that easement is getting too specific here because I'm not sure if that's the right option.
I think the way you word it's perfect.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Kilder.
I hope somebody wrote wrote down what you just said, because that seems to make the most sense.
Yep.
What I'm concerned about, our intent is to work with Jane and her committee. There's no doubt about that. My concern is before we get on the site, first of all, we have to sign a lease, which is about ready to be signed this week. Secondly, we've got to then do our own due diligence, site plan review ourselves, and then determine how the building and the structure is going to be designed and placed on the property. So I think your intent is correct. We want to work together, but to start talking about a specific easement in a specific area would not be helpful at the moment.
Yep.
I agree.
So just so everyone's on board, the proposed condition would read that the applicant shall include provisions for a multi-use trail in coordination with the Upper Trails Committee as part of any future application for site plan approval.
Thank you.
Through the chair, just to kind of turn this conversation on its head.
Oh,
I would recommend striking the condition altogether. The intent of the condition originally was to make this cooperation put into a decision, and it seems like the two organizations are very well intended to actually do that, and I don't know if the condition is necessary at this point.
So John, is there any downside to including this condition?
I mean, if the 26.2 foundation goes back on their intent to include a trail, then the board would not be able to require them to do so, but I don't think that's going to happen. But
so John, could we just change that to multi-use trail?
Yeah, that's what we did.
Yeah, I'm suggesting striking the condition altogether.
I'm looking at the board. How do you guys feel?
Mr. Chair, this is Muriel. I'm happy to keep the condition, but loosely, more broadly defined as you outlined it.
Yeah. I actually like keeping the condition as well. I think that's a great parcel, and I know how hard it is to map out trails in town, particularly when they're over, different types of ownership. And the fact that the applicant is willing to do that, I don't see a lot of downside to including it as a condition.
But if through the chair, my overall opinion is that we were here just to discuss whether cultural fit into Osmond or not. We weren't here to talk about the site plan at all. Let's just, it's set really beautifully in the site. I'm very pleasantly surprised at how beautifully set it is. I was really concerned about it, seeing some of the earlier images. But I just think it's going to be beautiful, and I'm really looking forward to this coming to fruition. And I think to get into any kind of site plan review right now, it's just too early. And to set any kind of conditions or expectations, I think they've heard us verbally, and I think it'll move forward exactly with our intent.
That's a fair point, and to that point, we will have an opportunity to make sure this is incorporated in the site plan review.
Exactly.
And through you, Mr. Chair, I would vote the same way to strike it, because in just thinking about it, I'm not sure I'd be comfortable with just including the Upper Charles, because what if they decide to go a different route and we wanted one of our other trails committee to put something through there? So, okay.
Is there any opposition to striking this proposed condition? I think we're all aligned in the intent, but I kind of agree with Deb's comments that just singling this out as the one condition that we have here feels maybe like it's a little much. Okay. So we have reviewed decision criteria. We've discussed proposed findings. We've discussed conditions. Is there any final comments from the board or public comment on this?
If I may add one thing, I know we kind of glossed over no waivers. We did request a waiver from the administrative submission fees, as it is a town-owned parcel, and the use is consistent with the town's issued RFP. We were hoping that at least for this use special permit that we could have the administrative fees waived.
For you, Mr. Chair, I'll be totally fine for that we can all do our part to help see this project move forward.
What would those fees have been, just out of curiosity?
John might have them in front of him, but I believe they were $300. Okay. Maybe. It was between $300 and $600, I think.
Yeah, I don't have them in front of me, but that sounds about right.
I'm comfortable relieving that as well. Any objections?
No, do we have to vote the waiver?
We should, yes. So
I'll make a motion to waive the fees.
Second.
All right. Any further discussion? Yep, go ahead, Brad.
Are we being consistent? I don't know how many other similar type of applicants have come forward as a museum or cultural use, but is that something that we've waived in the past? John,
I think through you, Mr. Chair, I think we probably did for the arts building. I don't know for sure, but just speaking for myself personally, I would be happy to set this precedent if it is a precedent.
I would concur. I was just looking for a historical context.
So through the chair, we have generally waived administrative fees for town associated projects. The site plans for the Elmwood School, the high school, and the Hopkins School were waived.
Thank you.
Playing the devil's advocate on this one, this is going to be run privately. It is for the benefit. Clearly, it's the benefit for the public, but it's not a publicly funded operation. It's not, and if we keep waiving fees, I mean, already the town, what are we going to do? Are we going to keep waiving fees all the time? And so that the town keeps losing $600 here, and then everybody has to pay for it in taxes. I'm not for waiving fees for something that's going to be profit making for another company. You know,
But
it's rented
just to
out,
clarify, I think this is a nonprofit. I don't think it's a for-profit
but
enterprise.
nonprofits make money too.
Okay, so if there's no other points, let's go ahead and take a vote on this waiver. We have a motion and a second. We'll start with Mr. Benson.
Rob Benson, yes.
Muriel?
Muriel Kramer, yes.
Jane? Oh, sorry, Jane's not voting on this. Dave?
Dave Paul, yes.
Mary?
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Deb?
Deborah Feinberg now.
Sundar?
Sundar Subramanian, yes.
Fran?
Fran DeYoung, yes.
And Gary Trendle is a yes. Okay, so that motion carries 7-1. And I guess at this point, we can go ahead. I will entertain a motion that the board finds that the proposed cultural use, the International Marathon Center, is in harmony with the general purpose and intent of this chapter. The use special permit will be consistent with and is subject to all provisions of the master plan special permit applicable to the Osmond district as a whole, and that the proposed use will not be detrimental to the neighborhood or the town.
Rob Benson, so moved.
Second, Dave Paul.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Benson, how do you vote?
Rob Benson, yes.
And Muriel?
Muriel Kramer, yes.
Dave?
Dave Paul, yes.
Mary?
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Deb?
Deb Feinberg, yes.
Sundar?
Sundar Subramanian, yes.
Fran?
Fran DeYoung, yes.
And Gary Trendle is a yes. And then lastly, I will entertain a motion that the board grant a special permit under Article 26 of the zoning bylaws, granting the waivers as discussed, and noting that there are no additional conditions associated with this special permit.
So moved.
Seconded.
Rob,
All right, Muriel with the motion, Sundar with the second. Any further discussion?
Just for clarity, Mr. Chair, that was waiver singular, right? Not plural?
Correct, singular.
Thank you.
All right, no further discussion. Rob, how do you vote?
Rob Benson, yes.
Muriel?
Muriel Kramer, yes.
Dave?
Dave Paul, yes.
Mary?
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Deb?
Deb Feinberg, yes.
Sundar?
Sundar Subramanian, yes.
Fran?
Fran DeYoung, yes.
And Gary Trendle's a yes. So that, congratulations. Special permit is approved 8-0. Lastly, we need to close this public hearing. So I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing for 53 East Main Street.
Sundar Subramanian, so moved.
Second.
All right, and assuming no further discussion, Rob, how do you vote?
Rob Benson, yes.
Muriel?
Muriel Kramer, yes.
Dave?
Dave Paul, yes.
Mary?
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Deb?
Deb Feinberg, yes.
Sundar?
Sundar Subramanian, yes.
Fran?
Fran DeYoung, yes.
And Gary Trendle is a yes. All right.
Wonderful. Thank you so
Good
much.
progress. Regan, thank you. Tim, thank you. Roy, appreciate your support there. We'll see you for that site plan review. Looking forward to getting into the details of it.
Good luck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All
you all.
right. Back to solar. So we'll use this as our last hearing. We'll see how the discussion goes. There is some potential we might need to continue this. But Mary, do you want to go ahead and quickly introduce the commercial solar overlay district proposal?
Certainly. So this bylaw proposal is to create a solar overlay district, which is comprised of primarily the 495 corridor and several of the other parcels as shown on the screen right now. This is the solar overlay district that was proposed for the 2020 town meeting and was not voted on because of COVID, et cetera. And It actually was not voted again by Zach this year to move forward. We based that on town council's newest advice was that it is unlikely to stand up if challenged in court. And, you know, John can probably give more detail of that if needed. But it was put in place as a placeholder by a planning board vote, I think last month. I can't remember exactly what date. So.
All right, thanks, Mary. And so again, we haven't, there hasn't been a lot of discussion around this since it was recommended for approval at 2020 town meeting. We did have a lot of discussion before that point. But I guess at this point, let's open it up to the board and see if people have comments or questions with regards to the proposed solar photovoltaic overlay district.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Dave.
So as you know, I'm a big proponent of this. Like Mary said, we originally had this districting before we came up with the tree cutting bylaw and the improvements in the article that we just previously approved. We talked this out a lot. Other towns do this. We know there are some legal challenges to this. My thought process is we put this before the town, and if they vote for it and we want to strengthen this, we could add future properties at some point to if we need to strengthen it with increasing more land or more properties into the map. I think if we just talk generally now and we include the 495 as all one property and the 2 Mechanic Street properties as one, I think we have six different components to this. We have the Lumber Street, we have the East Main Street, we have the Hayden Row. Those are the 3 on the right side. And on the upper left, we have Harvey's is the 4th one, and 495 down the middle, along with was it Mazer Street? No, what's the name of that street? Mechanic Street. Sorry, Mechanic Street. And so six sets of properties now, for the most part.
Okay. Thanks, Dave. Are there other comments from the board? Jane?
Sure. So I guess it's just plain common sense. Why would we vote to put this forward? Number one, because town council has already said that it most likely will not stand up in the court. And number two, if we put both this forward and the new language that Zach has worked so hard to improve on, based on town council's approval, why would we want to confuse our citizens? I would just like to see this go away and go with the language that Zach is putting forward.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Sure, go ahead, Dave.
So I just want to the second point about confusing the town. I don't think it's very confusing. I think all the hard work that Zach and Mary did applies to the zoning district. And I think the two dovetail each other and work nicely together, in my opinion.
You know what? I think that
I don't want to go back
let's hang on. You know what? I don't want to get into a back and forth because I think there's just going to be a consistent disagreement here between.
That's what's going to happen at town meeting. But yeah. Go ahead.
Yep. Muriel.
So I am in favor of letting the town weigh in on this. I know it's challenging. I know it's complex. I know that there are strong opinions on both sides, but I have a great deal of confidence in the town meeting voters. We've seen them do some really great work on some things that were complicated for us in the past.
Muriel, you went on mute.
You were automatically on mute. That was impressive.
My bad. Did you hear any of that wonderful statement?
No, I think some part of it, yes.
We heard
Sorry.
most of it.
Okay, great. At any rate, I know that this is a little complicated. I think that it makes sense for town meeting if we're able to stack the discussion to put the new wording from Zach first, just because the town meeting voter might contemplate this differently after they've contemplated that language. I do know that we keep repeating that town council says that they won't be able to defend it, but I think that they're not sure how they would defend it. And I think other towns have made these decisions. I think that zoning, since its inception, has been all about allowing towns to make some decisions for themselves. And I almost think that it's a little bit of an overreach by the state to tell us that we can't decide. Unlike any other zoning, we can't decide where a commercial use will be put in the town. So I guess I'm still very much in favor of letting the town have its say on the overlay. Excuse me.
All right, Fran?
Gary, Mr. Chairman, I'm also in favor of moving this forward to town meeting and letting the voters kind of see the work that this group is doing. I think it at a minimum, it provides or illustrates the fact that we are trying to be proactive, getting in front of this and creating some degree of framework for what a sober overlay district would be. Whether or not that gets passed, that's up to the voters. But I think this, as well as the additional proposal we discussed earlier, are not in confluence with each other or conflict with each other. I think they're actually somewhat complementary. So, and I think that also shows transparency to the townspeople. This is a big issue that they want to be able to weigh in on. You're right. I think it is going to potentially, it's going to be a lively discussion. Let's leave it at that. But I think it's something that that this group, I think, put forth in the right way. Again, shows the townspeople that this board is hearing what their concerns are and is trying to actively address it proactively. And I think the last point is, I think town council said there's not precedent right now.
I'm sorry, Fred, you're breaking up there. What was that again?
Whether or not this would be, I think town council said there's not precedent right now. So they think that it may get struck down, but I don't think they cited any specific cases. So that's their best guess, but I don't think it's in stone.
I would agree with that statement, Fran. Mary?
I just have a question, point clarification for John, and that is this on the warrant? And are we going to be voting just as to whether or not planning board recommends approval or does not recommend approval?
This is on the warrant. The planning board is at this hearing voting to recommend approval at town meeting. We could also take another vote to remove it from the warrant, just like any other zoning article that's currently on the warrant.
Okay, so we can vote to remove it, and we can also have it on the warrant and either vote to approve or not approve it.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sundar?
So I'm a little bit torn about this. I do agree with everybody's statement that even though the town council said this may not be defendable, they have not shown us a single case in the land court which has been, challenged and, gone against the town. So in that regard, we don't have a precedence. The town council doesn't have precedence. One of my concerns is, we've spent so much time in the ZAC and in this forum to discuss the bylaw changes. Something as definitive as this map could be very tempting to just put out there, and it could get passed because people like something which is definitive like this. Do we run the risk of town rejecting all the work that we've done with the bylaw itself, the changes in the language? So that's a little bit of a concern to me. I mean, could it become an either or situation but regardless, I feel that we have to, end of the day, trust the judgment of the citizenry. So with that in mind, I would be supportive of keeping this in the warrant and letting the town vote again for or against this.
All right. Who has not commented? Rob and Deb have not commented. Do either of you have?
Yeah, through the chair, we've talked about this for not consistently, but on and off for a year plus. I'm fully in support in getting this to the town meeting. Last town meeting, it was we were kind of forced to withdraw it at the last minute because of COVID concerns and the draw of citizens that would be there specifically to discuss this article. So I'm fully in support of it. The reality is many residents in town don't want a solar farm in their backyard, a large scale solar voltaic installation. And a lot of the town residents don't want to live in fear that there could be one in their backyard. So I think we owe it to the people that live in Hopkinton and all the people that vote in Hopkinton to bring this to town meeting.
All right. Deb, any thoughts?
Yeah, I have the yin and the yang sort of going on in my head, and I voted one time to not include the map because I understand the constraints and the ambiguity of the plan. And I voted, and then another time I voted for the other way around. So I understand legally where this could be perilous because it doesn't have specific definitions. And when we were talking, Jane was talking early on, and it was exactly what was determined and written in the language that they've set ahead of in the other amendments for. So I specifically I am torn because I understand it's a minefield. The plan is essentially a red swath, and in one sense, I have been a proponent all along for giving it a location and giving it a spot. But on the other hand, I've looked at the new amendments, the tree amendment, and I've looked at the newly worded solar farm amendment, and I am duly impressed at how controlled and how reasonable those are. I think it's almost like we should have discussed the tree amendment first and then come back to this one to get another perspective, because I think they're both such wonderfully introspective amendments in themselves that we don't necessarily need this one. On the other hand, see, I'm doing this. On the other hand, I truly believe that zoning has been what Hopkinton has done right, and that this would be doing it well as well. So that being said, I'm going to end it there because I'm still massively confused as to which one I would go with.
Okay.
But I think to have it on the warrant may cause some confusion because I don't think that people will completely understand the legal loopholes that the plan could represent. It doesn't come with a lot of definition, and I think that would be the concern.
Thanks, Deb. I'm just going to share my comments quickly, and then we'll see if people from the public have any thoughts on it. In general, I am supportive of the concept of a commercial solar photovoltaic overlay. My issues with this one is that, one, I think it's overly restrictive and that there are not very many options. And I think that goes steadfast against the intentions of the state and the guidance of our council. And secondly, we have not, I do not think that we have sufficiently defined the criteria by which we identify these properties that are well suited. And so that's just my personal opinion. I think there are a gazillion ways to poke holes in this. I think we're going to see that at town meeting. I respect the fact that our citizens want to. I think that there are many people out there that want to see this move forward. I understand that, but personally, I'm just apprehensive about moving something forward that I don't think is fully fleshed out. So that's my opinion on it. Are there any comments from the public? I see Mr. Joseph has turned on his camera.
Mr. Chairman, not at this time. I kind of agree with Deb. I think the tree bylaw has relevance to this, but that's obviously your purview.
All right. So I think we're probably ready to take a vote. So if there's no other comments.
I have a comment.
Oh, yes, please. Go ahead. Introduce yourself and your address, please.
Tom Robertson, 15 Fawn Ridge Road.
Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you. I guess what I wanted to say was three comments. The first is that I do agree with Jane's comment and the chairman's comments that criteria would be useful to include and would bolster the agreement, but I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think having a way to putting in the wording of the solar overlay, which says that this is our map as it stands, and this is how one goes about adding properties and subtracting them, and what the criteria, the minimum criteria are for either adding or subtracting, would be useful. Because, and I also agree with the citizen who mentioned that this goes in line with the, it's sort of integrated with the deforestation concept, in that, that's obviously a big part of what the solar overlay is intended to do as far as enhancing public welfare, in that, deforestation or the destruction of open land does in fact detract from the public welfare. And there's many studies that show not that
Mr. Robertson, sorry, I'm just going to interrupt you for a second, because we're not talking about the land clearing bylaw. We're only talking about the solar overlay district right now.
I know. I stated that it's related, and that in fact the idea of the solar overlay map is to protect the public interests in those areas where the solar is precluded from, and only mentioning the deforestation, and that it's related, in that open space, okay, that the solar overlay map is intended, or has a byproduct of that, is that it does not destroy open space, is relevant. And so, and my third point is that, well, just backing up for a second, I don't see any reason why the public shouldn't be given an opportunity to discuss and to have a vote on the concept of protected areas, because it's in the public interest. But if you believe that it's indefensible, which, as several people have pointed out, that there's no proof of that, then add some wording that says what the criteria are for putting additional properties on the map. And there you have a compromise.
All right, thank you. Do you have more? You're at 3 minutes now.
Yeah. So the last question is, I guess I'm interested in hearing why there is such concern about putting this to public vote, because it's let the citizens decide.
Yeah, I think I'm one of those people that has some concerns, and I think I expressed that. I think that we haven't done a sufficient job of identifying the criteria by which these properties were selected. So
It's been a
but
couple of years.
Yes, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying well, if it can't be determined in a couple of years, then it can't be determined, I guess. So let's put it to vote.
All right. Are there any other comments or questions? And if not, then I will entertain a motion to recommend approval of the Article 31 Solar Photovoltaic Installations Overlay District.
So moved.
Seconded.
Muriel with the second, Muriel with the motion, Sundar with the second. And discussion, Fran?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. If this originated from Zach, was there any discussion around identifying criteria for adding or deleting property? Has that already been fleshed out? Maybe I just missed it.
Mary?
There was a set of criteria. This was prior to the 2020 town meeting.
Yeah.
There was criteria. It was not further discussed and further refined in the late 2020 period leading up to the 2021 town meeting. So the original criteria was discussed, and that had to do with minimizing deforestation, not wanting solar photovoltaic installations near neighborhoods, which pretty much covers everything. And I can't remember. I think there was something else as well, but primarily those were the things. That, however, is those were the guiding principles behind it. But nonetheless, even at that time, planning board and the public, commented that there needed to be more specific criteria, and that we never addressed because, again, town council steered us away from this more clearly the second time around, that they did not think was defensible, and and so we focused on the wording changes that we already discussed tonight.
So through the chair, if I could also jump in on that.
Sure, John.
I think there were discussions at Zach after town meeting about criteria, not in what would be the criteria, but trying to find criteria. I made a series of maps identifying habitat of significance, breaking down the parcels in town by lot size to investigate whether we should limit the size of parcels and that type of stuff. And nothing came clear as to what would be good criteria to identify properties to include in the overlay. And I think Zach kind of got bogged down in that discussion to the point where no one could really think of how the criteria would be established. And then, as Mary said, the town council I don't want to put it on town council that they said this is indefensible. They strongly suggested that, given their read of the state laws and how they've heard things and whatever, this would be difficult to defend. Not that it was indefensible, but that it would be difficult to defend. They didn't say we couldn't do it. Just they advised against it.
And thank you, John, for pointing that out about the maps, because we went over a lot of those and I completely forgot about that. So yeah, we looked at the grades because we're talking about, perhaps limiting it to things that were under 10% or under 5% grade, and all sorts of different things, all sorts of, protected.
Through the chair, John, do you still have those maps?
I do.
Versions. I think it would be wonderful if this does go through, that we sort of have some sort of historical breakdown so that people understand that it just didn't create itself. It created itself over a process of evaluation of maps and criteria and original criteria.
Well, this map that's on the screen was not a product of that investigation and evaluation.
Oh, okay. There goes that.
All right. Yes, Jane. Just so people know, I think we're pretty close to a vote here. I know that people want to keep commenting on it, but just based on the go around before, I think we have a good sense as to where people stand. So I just want to be respectful of time. And if you have something new to say, then please do.
Well, I just want to remember people of that meeting when, I think it was John who said anybody who could, wants to add their property to this map should come forward. And there were over a dozen private property owners that came forward and in a public meeting and identified it that they wanted their property to be included in this map for the ability so that they could develop their land for future solar projects. And now you're just arbitrarily just avowing them. And I just want to point that out.
Thanks, Jane. Mary?
This is more a point of order. By voting on whether or not we recommend approval at town meeting, I think we're skipping the step entirely, and intentional or not, of deciding whether or not this is on the town warrant. So I don't know if
We had that vote at least once.
Yeah.
It is on the warrant.
We'd
No,
have to
I
take a
d-
vote
I-
to, we'd have to take a vote to remove it. We don't have to take a vote to keep it.
Okay. So
So I think that we have a motion to recommend approval. My inclination here is that if that vote fails, then we could entertain a motion to remove this from town warrant.
okay.
Is that correct, John?
Yes.
Okay.
You could also vote to remove it from the town warrant if it passes, but I don't know why you would.
Fair.
Seems unlikely.
Fair. But the motion on the table is to recommend approval for town meeting. And I think we've probably beaten this up pretty well. So if there's no further discussion, we will vote. Rob,
Do we have a someone made the motion in a second?
We do. Yes.
Okay.
Rob, how do you vote?
Rob Benson, yes.
Muriel?
Harold Kramer, yes.
Jane?
Jane, no.
Dave?
Dave Paul, yes.
Mary?
Mary Larson Marlowe, no.
Deb?
Deb Feinberg, no.
Sundar?
Subramanian, yes.
Fran?
Young, yes.
Gary Trindle is a no, so that motion carries. All right. Let's do this. We need to continue the public hearings. We also have minutes to review. Can we quickly do the minutes? Are you guys okay with that?
Yeah, can I suggest I make a motion for both sets of minutes to approve them?
Sure, you can make that motion.
Done.
Is there a second?
Second, Brent.
All right, and no further discussion. We can vote on those minutes for January 25th and February 1st. Just so that people are clarified, we are not reviewing the February 8th minutes because they were not done yet. Rob, how do you vote?
Yes, approved.
Muriel?
Muriel Kramer, yes.
Jane?
Jane Moran, yes.
Dave?
Dave Paul, yes.
Mary?
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Deb?
Deb Feinberg, yes.
Sundar?
Subramanian, yes.
Fran?
And Young, yes.
And Gary Trindle is a yes. And then lastly, I will entertain, not lastly, but I will entertain a motion to continue the new public hearings for the proposed zoning bylaw amendments, as well as the new public hearing for the proposed general bylaw amendment to the March 15th meeting.
So moved.
Seconded.
All right, Muriel with the motion, Sundar with the seconds. Assuming no further discussion, Rob, how do you vote?
Rob Benson, yes.
Muriel?
Muriel Kramer, yes.
Jane?
Jane Marin, yes.
Dave,
Dave Paul, yes.
Mary,
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Deb,
Deb Feinberg, yes.
Sundar,
Sundar Sivaram, yes.
Fran,
Randy, yes.
and Gary Trendle is a yes. So next meeting, we are continuing the Wilson Street amendments. We've got the rest of our bylaws to work through. We also have mental health presentation from Don Alcott Miller, which I think I've been thinking a lot about that, and I think there's a ton we can do as a planning board to help improve mental health over the long term. And then the last thing that we want to circle back on at some point is our working groups from our 2021 objectives. So, but on that note, I know it's late. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Sundar Sivaram, so moved.
Deborah Feinberg, second.
And assuming no discussion, Rob, how do you vote?
Rob Benson, yes.
Muriel?
Muriel Kramer, yes.
Jane?
Jane Marin, yes.
Dave?
Dave Paul, yes.
Mary?
Mary Larson Marlowe, yes.
Deb?
Deb Feinberg, yes.
Sundar?
Sundar Sivaram, yes.
Fran?
Randy Young, yes.
And Gary Trendle is a yes. So thanks, everyone. Thanks for staying with us here. And we'll see you all in 2 weeks. Have a good night.
Great meeting, Gary. Thank you.